Should we hide elsewhere? Someone whispered, what if something dashes out of the forest? There's no need to go elsewhere. Ren Xiaosu shook his head. The animals obviously wanted to hide in here, but we already occupied the spot. Just this point alone proves that the cave we're in should be safe enough. Just what could they be avoiding? Lu Buletin wondered. Su Xianchul looked at the forest outside the cave. They might be trying to avoid the forest. Or more specifically, the forest at night. Ren Xiaosu nodded. I think so too. Animals are far more alert to danger than humans because of their instincts. Do y'all remember? When we passed through the canyon, we saw some human skeletons lying there. But since we entered the forest, we did not see any skeletons of animals. That's unusual. As long as it's a living creature, it will live and die. How is it possible that we didn't even see the skeletal remains of an animal? Ren Xiaosu continued, I had dumped some fish scraps and bones in the forest south of the canyon. But when I went to check on it the next morning, I found that they'd already disappeared. There were no traces of it being moved away in the surrounding area. It just disappeared in the same way as Su Xia's corpse had. There's one thing in common about these missing skeletal remains and the corpse, which is that they were in the forest at the time. Yes. Su Xianchu nodded. Besides, these creatures show that they're really afraid of the forest, so it's clear that it's fishy. A forest that eats living creatures. The others gazed into the forest and started wondering if the botanical life had also started evolving after the animals had evolved. Su Xianchu comforted, but actually, this is a good thing. Now that we've identified a pattern, we can take precautions. When an unknown fear becomes known, and when you can even understand the logic behind it, that fearful feeling will lessen. That's right, as long as no one entered the forest at night, everything should be fine. Thinking of this, their fear from earlier dispersed a little. Wang Lei smiled and said, then we must find a place far away from the forest to set up camp before nightfall. Ren Xiaosu shook his head. We need to be careful not only at night but also during the day. We don't know whether these animals and plants have evolved to the stage where they might even eat people during the day. Then we'll just walk along the sparser areas of the mountain ridges. Su Xianchu made the final decision. Everyone went back to chewing on the pine roots before someone asked, Ren Xiaosu, how did you discover that pine roots are edible? I didn't discover it myself. Someone in town mentioned it before, Ren Xiaosu said as he calmly added more firewood to the campfire. Lu Buletin was looking to ease his relationship with Ren Xiaosu, so he quickly praised, you townspeople know so much about the wilderness. This is truly humanity's wisdom. Lu Buletin did not know how he should praise him, so he came up with something random for the sake of praise. However, Ren Xiaosu did not quite agree with his statement. He looked at him and said, that's not wisdom. Who would be willing to eat pine roots if they had proper food to eat? The townspeople have long said pine roots are edible. When I first heard it, I imagined just how many people died of hunger in the past. In an era where refugees might not even be able to survive until the next day, everything they did would be related to their survival. Lu Buletin had only wanted to pepper him with some good words, but he ended up falling into an even more embarrassing situation. Luo Zhenyu eased the tension. Why are the wild animals getting larger in size but not humans? Instead, we're evolving into supernatural beings like Su Xianchu. Maybe it's because humans evolve in a different way. Su Xianchu said, from the ancient times to the present day, humans have always been evolving their brain power. Ren Xiaosu said, I've heard another explanation. Last year, I had some doubts after I escaped from the wolves, so I asked Mr. Zhang from the school about it. He said to me, some living creatures in nature can develop strong muscles without the need for much exercise. There used to be a species of animal called the chimpanzee that was caged by humans in the past. Even if they just ate and slept every day, they would still develop greater muscle mass than humans. But if humans only ate and slept every day, their muscles would end up shrinking. Yang Xiaojun spoke, that Mr. Zhang from your school is no normal person. Ren Xiaosu did not know how Yang Xiaojun passed that judgment. He did not know if Zhang Jinglan was a normal person, but he knew he was a good person. He continued, Mr. Zhang mentioned that there's a gene in the human body that restricts muscle development, and that gene has been evolving as humans get smarter and smarter. He said that it's the price to pay for wisdom. Everyone got lost in thought as though that were really the case. People among them from the upper class liked exercising to lose weight, and it even became a trend among them. This activity was especially popular 2 years ago. Even Liu Buletin participated in such activities by joining the trend to fit in with the upper class, but he later realized how difficult it was to gain any muscles through exercising. But suddenly, Yang Xiaojun poured cold water on Ren Xiaosu. I've seen a supernatural being with an evolved build before, so how do you explain that? Ren Xiaosu was taken aback. He pondered it before saying, could his ancestors have had an illicit relationship with a wild animal? Yang Xiaojun was speechless. Su Xianchu was speechless. Liu Buletin was speechless. Everyone was speechless as they looked at Ren Xiaosu. This turned into a fucking insult. Luo Xinyu suddenly became interested in this topic. That Mr. Zhang from your school seems outstanding. He must be very knowledgeable, right? Ren Xiaosu thought for a while and answered, he's quite knowledgeable, but when he encounters a subject he doesn't understand during class, he just bluffs his way through. Does he usually read books to brush up on his knowledge when he has free time? There are also such people in the stronghold. Luo Xinyu said, those people are all very smart. Nope. Ren Xiaosu shook his head. He just plants vegetables in the schoolyard when he has free time. Luo Xinyu was speechless for a while. Why were the majority of things in town so different from what she expected? However, Ren Xiaosu felt that Zhang Jinglan was quite good in this way. He studied hard but not overzealously. Even though he was very knowledgeable, he would still do manual labor like hoeing. All of a sudden, everyone heard the rattling of chains being dragged on the ground coming from the forest. When the chains collided with the ground, a sharp rattle could be heard. The creator of the sound seemed to be crawling the forest grounds and patrolling its territory. Ren Xiaosu and the others felt chills running up their spines. How could there still be a living creature walking through the forest at this time of night? Could their previous assessment of the situation be wrong? Were those animals not trying to avoid the forest? But what was going on now? The rattling of the chains being dragged was getting closer and closer. What creature would move around while dragging chains? Had it been chained up but broken free somehow? Just what sort of a place was the Jing Mountains? Why was there such weird happenings here? That rattling of the chains being dragged seemed to be attracted by the light in the cave. It slowly came towards the edge of the forest. Ren Xiaosu, Yang Xiaojun, and Su Xianchu each disengaged the safety on their guns and were prepared to shoot in the direction of the sound. Almost instantaneously, Yang Xiaojun realized that Ren Xiaosu's handling of the gun was too professional and even looked a little familiar. This familiarity was somewhat baffling, but it made her feel extraordinarily comfortable. It was like how patients with obsessive-compulsive disorders felt after finally properly placing blocks of wood in front of themselves. But right now, she did not have time to think about that. This was because the owner of the chains had crawled to the edge of the forest. The people in the cave were straining to see what it was, but the other party kept itself hidden in the darkness and never showed itself. When Ren Xiaosu heard a dripping sound from the forest, he felt nauseous as he realized it was the other party's saliva that was dripping onto the leaves on the forest floor. The moment it shows up, shoot it. Su Xianchu said, our firepower will be quick enough to cover all of the directions that it can rush into the cave from. Then I'll command my shadow clone to subdue it. Okay, Ren Xiaosu answered softly. He thought, if the creature turns out to be too strong, I won't care about hiding my shadow clone anymore. Nobody knew where those cheetah-sized wildcats and the boars built like miniature mountains had escaped to, but Ren Xiaosu knew that only a stronger and more unstoppable force could send those ferocious animals running from the forest. As Ren Xiaosu took longer breaths, his emotions calmed down. He no longer paid attention to his heartbeat and breathing, but listened attentively for any sounds or movements coming from the forest. The secret of the forest might just reveal its true face at the very next moment. But what they didn't expect was that when the rattling chains rang out again from the forest, it was of the chain's owner moving further away. What's happened? Su Xianchu frowned as he said, could it be afraid to come out of the forest? The three of them were still holding their aim as they were afraid the other party was trying to pull a fast one on them. Ren Xiaosu gave it some thought and said, it's very possible that the other party isn't willing to walk out of the forest. Otherwise, the wild animals from earlier wouldn't have regarded this cave to be their refuge when it's only about 10 meters away from the forest. The rattling of the chains being dragged on the ground sounded further and further away. Ren Xiaosu and the two of them could finally relax a little. It seems that we're still too optimistic. We can't explore the secret of the Jing Mountains with just our guesswork. Something is definitely fishy about the forest, or there could be some other forms of terror in it. Ren Xiaosu said, otherwise, it would be impossible to explain the disappearance of Su Xia's body without any clues. Everyone, get some rest. Su Xianchu said, I'll take the first shift tonight. You guys can take over from me after midnight. But despite the words, Ren Xiaosu and Yang Xiaojun still tacitly stuck to their own two-shift rotation, with one keeping watch for the first half of the night and the other taking the second half. Seeing this, Su Xianchu gave a wry smile in his mind. It seemed that he was still an untrustworthy person to them. Nothing else happened through the night. When the first rays of sunlight shone down in the morning, Ren Xiaosu could hear the shuffle of wild animals returning to the forest in the distance. From the looks of it, these animals were accustomed to taking refuge during the night and returning into the forest during the day. Could the wild animal with the chains from last night be a creature that slept during the day? Ren Xiaosu stood up to stretch. But before he could even stretch his back, he heard a loud explosion come from the depths of the Jing Mountains. The sound was so abrupt that Ren Xiaosu jumped in fright. The people in the cave came out one after another. What's going on? What happened? Someone asked, could a volcano in the Jing Mountains have erupted? It doesn't sound like a volcano. Su Xianchu shook his head. It sounded more like the explosives that we humans use. If Su Xianchu couldn't confirm it, Ren Xiaosu and Yang Xiaojun could. Ren Xiaosu had copied the advanced bomb-making skill from Yang Xiaojun, together with an indeterminate number of experimental blasts she had carried out. From that sound, Ren Xiaosu was sure it was the directional blast of a shaped charge 1. This sort of shaped charge would be similar to that of an armor-piercing projectile, which usually used violent blasts to create holes in a hard ground. It used the Monroe effect 1 to orient the wave of the blast to create huge holes in the ground. The sound of this explosive was clearly different from that of a satchel charge and mine-clearing line charge. Satchel charges 1 were packed explosives with powerful shockwaves used for demolishing bunkers and other types of buildings. Mine-clearing line charges were demolition devices like the Bangalore one. Ren Xiaosu knew that if he could recognize the sound, Yang Xiaojun could definitely recognize it as well. Someone was excavating the depths of the mountains. Why were they excavating? Could there really be some sort of huge secret buried beneath the Jing Mountains? Earlier, you said that there were also other squads that came to the Jing Mountains. Ren Xiaosu turned around and asked Su Xianchu. Yes, they were likely from the Qing Consortium as well. Su Xianchu said, after all, Stronghold 112 is also controlled by the Qing Consortium, so it would be very hard for any other organization to get past them to enter the Jing Mountains. Ren Xiaosu flicked a glance at Yang Xiaojun. So her purpose for coming here under that guise was also because of the secret in the Jing Mountains? Ren Xiaosu did not know what Yang Xiaojun's trump card was even now. Other than her perfect firearms proficiency, this cap-wearing girl must have had something else she could rely on. Let's go, we have to hurry. Su Xianchu was not about to be left out of whatever was happening. Based on this explosion we heard, the Qing Consortium might have sent out a massive military force from Stronghold 112. We have to rush there before they get to the secret. Do you have a death wish? Ren Xiaosu looked at Su Xianchu in a speechless manner. Knowing the Qing Consortium has already sent reinforcements, you still dare to rush in there? After a long silence, Su Xianchu said, but we're already here. Ren Xiaosu and Yang Xiaojun looked at each other. For some reason, those words had a magical charm. Besides, do we have anywhere else to retreat to? Su Xianchu asked, since we can't fall back, we can only go forward. If we don't get an opportunity when we're there, we'll just go around the Qing Consortium and leave the mountains in the direction they came from. I believe the path they took here will be much safer than us turning back here. That was true. They knew even explosives had been used, so the Qing Consortium had probably cleared out an entire path to Stronghold 112. It seemed like Ren Xiaosu, Su Xianchu, and Yang Xiaojun were the most interested in the secret of the Jing Mountains. Luo Xinyu, Lu Buletin, and Wang Lei were different. They only hoped to quickly join up with those from the Qing Consortium. Regardless of the secret, they would only have a chance of survival if they headed somewhere with a lot of people. They had seen the Qing Consortium's combat brigade in Stronghold 113 before, and the private troops definitely paled in comparison. So they believed they would be safe once they joined up with them. And besides, both Luo Xinyu and Lu Buletin could say that they were on good terms with the Qing Consortium. Although they were not particularly close, they had met Boss Luo on several occasions. Therefore, if they brought up Boss Luo's name and made known their identities when the time came, they would immediately get returned to human civilization. To them, the wilderness was a world that belonged to the beasts. There was also another point. As they almost had an encounter with the mysterious monster of the forest last night, they wanted to quickly get out of this place before it got dark again. Worried about the monster, Ren Xiaosu tried his best to travel in the open areas of the mountains instead of going through the forest. Who knew if that monster would be active during the day? It was not as though it had personally informed them that it wouldn't venture out in the day. What if it just liked being a night owl and was actually not afraid of daylight? What if its daily routine had been messed up today? No one knew for sure. Their cave was about several dozen kilometers away from the sound of the explosion in the Jing Mountains. If they hurried up, they could reach the range by evening. Of course, Ren Xiaosu was also afraid of any potential accidents. He held a discussion with Su Xianchu and Yang Xiaojun. We can't only consider the straight line distance of the route in the mountains. We have to account for the winding paths that we might need to take. We may need to walk for several more days based on the distance that we worked out before we can get there. What do you mean? Su Xianchu asked. If we can't get there by today, we must not take the risk of traveling through the night. Ren Xiaosu said firmly, if y'all insist on it, I'll find a place by myself and wait until dawn. Su Xianchu thought for a moment and said, I agree. We won't travel through the night. Su Xianchu and Ren Xiaosu looked over to Yang Xiaojun, and she said, I agree. Let's hope the journey won't be too difficult, Ren Xiaosu said. Nobody knew where Luo Xinyu and Lu Buletin found their strength from for today's march. They had just burst the blisters on their feet last night by picking at them. But with the intensity of walking to be done today, the skin on their soles would probably be torn off by the time they were finished. Seeing this, Ren Xiaosu teased them by suggesting that they could rest for the day. However, Lu Buletin stated matter-of-factly that he was fine with carrying on. As Lu Buletin, Luo Xinyu, and Wang Lei were just normal people, it was obvious they had unleashed their greatest potential due to their desire to survive. Suddenly, Su Xianchu said, there's a human body up front. Ren Xiaosu looked up and spotted a human body lying quietly in the middle of the valley of the mountain pass. But what surprised him was that there were scattered pieces of clothing lying next to the nearly skeletal remains of the body. The blood had dried into a dark purple patch on the rocky ground. Ren Xiaosu said in bewilderment, since there's still flesh and blood and no decomposition, it means that this person died not too long ago. Wait a minute, why would a relatively fresh human corpse appear here? Could it be someone from the Qing consortium? No. Su Xianchu shook his head and said, look at what he was wearing. That's the uniform of the private army. The uniform of the private army is dark blue while the Qing consortium's uniform is black. The private army? Which private army? Does Stronghold 112's private army also wear the same uniform? Ren Xiaosu wondered. They warily approached it and had an ominous feeling. Su Xianchu saw a small dog tag that was supposed to be hanging around the neck of the corpse. In this way, everyone would know the identity of the deceased. But he was stunned when he picked up the dog tag. Su Xia? How could this be Su Xia? Ren Xiaosu felt a chill in his heart. Are you sure this is Su Xia? Look at this. The name on the dog tag wouldn't be wrong, Su Xianchu said. As he spoke, he had his automatic rifle up in the fear that something terrible would charge from next to him. Ren Xiaosu looked at the dog tag. It's really Su Xia. Why would his corpse be here? Su Xia's corpse had gone missing before they entered the canyon. As they had walked almost 100 kilometers over the past 2 days, how could Su Xia's corpse suddenly appear here by itself? What could have brought Su Xia's corpse here? While Yang Ziajin and Su Xianchu raised their guns in response to this discovery, Ren Xiaosu squatted down and inspected the corpse. Luo Xinyu and Lu Buletin were sickened by this sight from the start, and after vomiting for a while, Luo Xinyu asked, "Aren't you afraid?" Ren Xiaosu's expression did not change at all. "I've seen worse." "Wait, there's something off about the wounds on this corpse. Although that monster ate his organs, look at the wounds on the edge of the abdomen. What could create such neat bite marks? I've never come across any animal with a set of teeth like this." Even Yang Ziajin and Su Xianchu couldn't help but look over when Ren Xiaosu said that. They understood just how much Ren Xiaosu knew about the wilderness. If Ren Xiaosu said that he hadn't seen it before, it would have to be an unusual animal. But when Su Xianchu saw it, he frowned. Fuck, these are the bite marks of a human. It seemed that Su Xianchu had even started spouting obscenities due to a deep kind of fear. But not just Su Xianchu. Ren Xiaosu and Yang Ziajin were also getting the chills. Ren Xiaosu looked up and asked, "Are you sure?" "I'm very sure." Su Xianchu said, "I was bitten on the arm by my first love when I broke up with her in school." Ren Xiaosu snapped, "Why the hell are you telling us that when we were scared to death?" Ren Xiaosu was truly afraid now. Su Xianchu also felt a little scared. Why are there human bite marks on the corpse? I wonder. Ren Xiaosu asked, could it be possible that the one dragging the chains last night was a human? Let's get out of here. Yang Ziajin said, set up a 3-man tactical formation in case something attacks us. If that thing can silently take the corpse away, it can silently sneak up on us as well. Ren Xiaosu asked nervously, what's a tactical formation? He was not fooling around as he really did not know. You stand on my left. Yang Ziajin did not explain too much. Each of us will take care of whatever comes into our field of view. If any strange creatures approach us, shoot them down. All of a sudden, Yang Ziajin had taken command of the team. However, neither Ren Xiaosu nor Su Xianchu said anything. At this moment, everyone understood that they were walking a tightrope. If they were not careful, they would be doomed. Everyone wanted to survive, especially Ren Xiaosu. When Ren Xiaosu and the group got closer to where the Qing consortium was, they became even more cautious. Based on the usual strategies that a combat brigade uses, scouts set up observation posts one around the area while they conduct demolition and reconnaissance. Su Xianchu said, so we must be as careful as possible when approaching them. Are they that professional? There are even observation posts. Ren Xiaosu said, but it's not like there are only observation posts, right? They've probably cleared the entire surrounding area with their military force. You saw how frightened that wildcat was just now, didn't you? Ren Xiaosu understood animal behavior very well. Cats had become extremely calm and cautious animals again after they went feral. They seldom panicked in the way the wildcat did just now. Sure enough, they could vaguely hear the intense sound of gunfire as they slowly started approaching again. Ren Xiaosu thought that the armed forces of the consortium were truly much stronger than the private army. The private troops seemed to have been sent here to die while the consortium could give the beasts of the Jing Mountains a good thrashing. He suddenly recalled what Zhang Jinglin had said before, the firearms and explosives humans possess are far more powerful than you all can imagine. With the advanced firearms skill, Ren Xiaosu could now deeply understand how true Zhang Jinglin's statement was. At this moment, a wounded boar ran towards Ren Xiaosu and the team. Su Xianchu whispered, "Don't shoot, let it go." The boar was a little larger than the ones they had seen. However, its head and abdomen were bleeding profusely, making it very aggressive as well. Su Xianchu and the others quickly moved away to avoid the path of the boar. It was not that they couldn't kill the boar, but since they could hear the gunshots of the consortium's combat troops, the consortium could hear them as well. Furthermore, what worried them the most was that they would get discovered in advance by the consortium. Lu Buletin looked at the boar and said, "Since we haven't eaten for almost a day now, it'd be great if we could stop it and roast it." Ren Xiaosu lamented how such a group of people could actually exist in this world. Their existence merely served as a foil to make others look better. He said to Lu Buletin, "I'm so envious of you. Even though you've evolved into something with intelligence, you don't use it. You look super carefree." Lu Buletin choked on his words and did not say anything more. Su Xianchu explained, "By setting up a naked flame here, aren't you telling the Qing consortium that you're here?" Seeing the boar pass them by, Wang Lei wondered, "Shouldn't we quickly make contact with those from the Qing consortium? Since we're all humans, why should we be worried about getting discovered by them?" Wang Lei, Lu Buletin, and Luo Xinyu were hoping that the Qing consortium would come and rescue them immediately. Yang Xiaojin replied, "Many organizations have sent out their military forces to carry out investigations at the mysterious place controlled by the Pyro Company, but all of them have been silenced. Do you think that if the Qing consortium also finds you here, they would treat you nicely and keep you well fed, then send you back to the stronghold? This is also the reason why the private troops dispatched by Stronghold 113 had to travel under the guise of being part of a band, even if it was pretty obvious they were not. To the consortium, the secrets here were more valuable than human lives. You guys actually think that something like a corporation would save you?" Su Xianchu sighed. When Lu Buletin, Luo Xinyu, and Wang Lei, who had originally planned on seeking help from the consortium, heard this, they looked bereaved. Frankly, they did not have much contact with the world at large and would be considered relatively inexperienced by the consortium standards. As such, they did not understand how an organization worked nor knew how cruel this world was because they had lived a sheltered life all this while. They were only required to do well in their everyday jobs in the stronghold to ensure there would be food and drink without having to worry about other things like wild animals or hunger. The consortium told them the outside world was very safe and that the wild animals had already been cleared out of the stronghold perimeter. As such, they all fell for the false show of peace and prosperity that was put up in the stronghold. Why are we still headed there then? When Lu Buletin realized he would be silenced if he were found, he lost the pillar of support that kept him going for the day. His desire to seek help from the Qing consortium had almost become his last lifeline. Lu Buletin sat on the ground, dejected. "You all can go ahead. I'm not going to walk any further." Ren Xiaosu and the others continued moving forward without paying attention to Lu Buletin. To them, it didn't really matter whether Lu Buletin died or not. Honestly, Ren Xiaosu preferred that Lu Buletin stayed here. Listening to the subtle sound of the wind in the trees around him, Lu Buletin got even more frightened. Before the others could walk out of sight, he got up again and said, "Wait for me." At this moment, Ren Xiaosu asked, what should we do if we encounter the Qing Consortium's troops? Su Xianchu thought for a moment and said, we should be making retreating our main priority. Their main mission must be the excavation of the pre-cataclysm civilization, not hunting us down. You all have underestimated the consortium's determination to lock down the news. Yang Xiaojin shook her head and said, they're definitely not going to let the matter rest once they discover our presence. Moreover, they have wireless comms in their helmets. If they discover they can't kill us off immediately, they'll definitely call for backup. When that time comes, you'll find that you'd rather spend time with the face bugs. Ren Xiaosu was stunned. Was this Qing Consortium really that fearsome? He asked, you seem to know a lot about the troops of these consortiums. Yang Xiaojin glanced at him but did not answer the question. We must kill all visible targets once we encounter them. Do not show mercy to them because they will not show mercy to us either. But the consortium soldiers also have children and mothers. Wang Lei said hesitantly, wouldn't that be too cruel? Yang Xiaojin said calmly, not one snowflake in an avalanche is innocent. Be it voluntary or forced, anyone in war is a tragic figure, while also inflicting tragedies onto others. Let's go. Su Xianchu looked at the forest up ahead. The secret of the Jing Mountains was calling out to them. If the consortium had given up on this place, they would probably have lost interest as well. But if this secret were so precious to the consortium, there must be something valuable about it. They would die if they turned back, so the only way to survive was to march forward. Su Xianchu and the others carefully identified the direction of the gunshots, as they tried their best to avoid a head-on encounter with the consortium's combat troops. Ren Xiaosu estimated they would probably find out what was hidden in the Jing Mountains in an hour's time. Su Xianchu whispered to Ren Xiaosu, this is when the Qing Consortium will set up the observation posts around the perimeter. Even with their manpower, they won't be able to lock down such a large area with just several hundred people. About how many people are there in a Qing Consortium combat brigade? Ren Xiaosu asked. Su Xianchu hesitated before saying, approximately 4,000 to 5,000, but it's impossible they would mobilize all of them. After all, they still have to consider keeping order in the stronghold. No, Ren Xiaosu shook his head and said, I don't think there's a big problem in the stronghold. Will the people in a stronghold dare to rebel in just a few days? That's impossible. So we have to be prepared that they have turned out in full force with at least a few thousand people. All right. Su Xianchu understood his argument but was hoping they would be lucky. He analyzed the situation before saying, but actually, they will not mobilize their full force. The supplies of the various strongholds are not enough to provision a few thousand-strong expedition into the Jing Mountains for such a long period of time. It's not that there aren't enough supplies, but that the transportation, logistics, manpower issues, etc., all have to be considered. As their soldiers brought a lot of firearms and explosives with them, I believe the advanced party that arrived at the Jing Mountains should number around 1,000 men or so after taking into account a comprehensive mix of factors. Ren Xiaosu thought it over. Su Xianchu probably had a more expert opinion on military operations. He said, I trust your judgment. But I'll still say the same thing. If the observation posts make the perimeter too secure, I'll take a detour out of the mountains in the direction of Stronghold 112 without hesitation. Okay. Su Xianchu nodded. He knew that Ren Xiaosu's decision was right. After all, if he, Ren Xiaosu, and Yang Xiaojin were to face the pursuit of over 1,000 people, it would surely lead to a very bad end. Su Xianchu put on a face of determination. If we need to resort to guerrilla warfare, we'll have to abandon the other three since they won't be able to keep with our pace. Wait a minute. As he spoke, Su Xianchu was stunned. He looked around and asked, where's Yang Xiaojin? Ren Xiaosu was also shocked. After looking around, he asked Lu Buletin, who was at the rear of the team, have you seen Yang Xiaojin? No, I wasn't paying attention, Lu Buletin answered blankly. Everyone realized that no one knew when Yang Ziajin had disappeared during their journey. If it were Lu Buletin who went missing, Ren Xiaosu would think that he might have been taken away by something. But for Yang Ziajin, that would definitely not be the case. Ren Xiaosu and Su Xianchu had thought that Lu Buletin, Luo Xinyu, and Wang Lei would be their burden, but they suddenly got a feeling that Yang Ziajin thought that all 5 of them were her burden. But what exactly was Yang Ziajin's purpose in coming here? Ren Xiaosu realized that she might not be after the secret of the Jing Mountains at all. Yang Ziajin carried an even greater secret. Ren Xiaosu and Su Xianchu looked at each other as though they came to a decision at the same time. So, Ren Xiaosu said righteously, Yang Ziajin might have fallen behind. As teammates, we should split up to look for her. It'll be too dangerous if she's found by herself. Ren Xiaosu and Su Xianchu then walked separately in 2 different directions. Lu Buletin, Luo Xinyu, and Wang Lei looked back at the way they came and wondered how Yang Ziajin could have disappeared so quietly. Lu Buletin asked, "Do you feel that Yang Ziajin has been behaving very strangely? She paid us to join the team, but it's clear that she has her own purpose in coming here." Lu Buletin turned to look in the directions of where Ren Xiaosu and Su Xianchu went. However, both of them had also gone missing. What the fuck? What did you mean by splitting up to look for her? You two were obviously making your escape. Ren Xiaosu, Su Xianchu, and Yang Ziajin had respectively made their decisions to drop their burdens once they got near the hinterlands of the Jing Mountains. After all, they knew how powerful the Qing Consortium's troops were. Whether they were to sneak in or take a detour and leave, they couldn't afford to bring Lu Buletin, Luo Xinyu, and Wang Lei along with them. Anyway, they were not related nor owed them anything, so there was really no stress when it came to making the decision to abandon them. But Ren Xiaosu found it quite unfortunate, as he had been constantly trying to find ways to gain the gratitude of these people during the past few days. After putting in much effort and gaining 93 gratitude tokens from them, it would not be easy to earn more of them now that he had to go solo. Lu Buletin, Luo Xinyu, and Wang Lei panicked on the spot. They had wanted to seek help from the Qing Consortium but found out that they might get killed instead. Thus, they thought that it would also be a good idea to leave with Ren Xiaosu, Su Xianchu, and Yang Ziajin. But to their surprise, the 3 of them ran off one after the other. But while they were in a state of confusion, Lu Buletin, Luo Xinyu, and Wang Lei suddenly heard the rattling of chains being dragged on the ground. They felt a tingling sensation on their scalps. Didn't they say the monster wouldn't be active during the day? Why did it keep following the team then? They remembered Su Xia's ravaged corpse and the wild animals that had fled from the forest the previous night. Lu Buletin could even remember the sound of the monster's saliva dripping onto the leaves. A second later, Lu Buletin turned around and ran away. He didn't care anymore whether the Qing Consortium would kill him or not. He just didn't want to die. When Lu Buletin started to run, the other 2 followed him. However, Lu Buletin suddenly discovered that he could not run as fast as Wang Lei and Luo Xinyu. Although Wang Lei was wounded before this, he had already fully recovered in slightly over 2 days due to the magical effects of the black medicine. He was terrified of the mysterious monster behind him, but right as he passed Lu Buletin, Wang Lei suddenly saw that Lu Buletin had unexpectedly stretched out his foot to trip him. With a loud thud, Wang Lei fell heavily onto the ground. Lu Buletin could only apologize in his head. Someone had to be sacrificed in order for others to live. Lu Buletin ran away as fast as he could. But before he could get far, he heard Wang Lei's scream and the disturbing sound of chewing flesh. Wang Lei's scream tore into Lu Buletin like a fearsome ghost. However, this scream did not last long before it stopped. The rattling of the chains could be heard again, and the monster chased after them once more. Lu Buletin was in despair. When he thought of pulling Luo Xinyu down this time, he found that she had already gotten far away from him. Who is it? Someone was talking up ahead in the forest. Lu Buletin focused his vision over there and realized that the person was wearing a pure black uniform and holding a gun in his hands. Lu Buletin shouted, "A monster! There's a monster behind me. He saw the consortium soldier making several tactical hand signals, followed by more than 20 soldiers appearing out from the forest beside him as they slowly made their way towards Lu Buletin. It was a full platoon of soldiers. The person leading the platoon ordered, "Kneel down and put your hands behind your head." Lu Buletin immediately knelt down on the ground. He knew that if he did not follow his instructions, these combat troops would open fire and kill him. All he could do now was to leave his life in the hands of fate. The rattling of the chains grew closer. When the owner of the chains showed up, the soldier shouted through the wireless communications equipment in his helmet, "Please send reinforcements. We've spotted an escaping experimental." Fire! Gunfire thundered. However, even with such a powerful platoon, they did not hesitate to call for reinforcements when they came into contact with the experimental. This showed that they did not have the confidence to defeat it with their current strength. Lu Buletin and Luo Xinyu knelt on the ground as they listened to the sound of gunfire bursting out around them. A soldier slung his rifle over his shoulder and tied Lu Buletin and Luo Xinyu's thumbs on both hands together with some plastic strips. It was tied so tightly that they were in pain. Furthermore, the soldier completed a body search on Lu Buletin in just 2 seconds and ensured that this man and woman in front of him would not be of any threat. The soldier did not ask them anything. He just left them to rejoin his team and continued with the battle. All the other soldiers ignored Lu Buletin. It was as though he did not exist. Each of them had their own responsibilities and were working like gears in a well-oiled machine. They took every step with steady precision. Someone muttered, "What is that plastic doll he's carrying on his back?" Someone on the communications channel shouted, "The experimental has fled to our 9 o'clock. Take notice, formations over there. The experimental has fled to our 9 o'clock." The experimental also did not seem like it wanted to confront these platoons with such heavy firepower. It chose to avoid them for now. At this moment, Lu Buletin felt that comparing the combat strength of the consortium's troops to the private army was simply a matter of heaven and earth. With these sights, the private army was like a pig farm compared to the consortium. Lu Buletin had been worried the consortium would immediately kill him. After all, Ren Xiaosu and Yang Xiaojun had described them as demons. By the looks of it, that was not the case. The consortium tied him up together with Luo Xinyu but did not do anything to them. With that, Lu Buletin was finally relieved. At least, he would not have to die, right? However, a moment later, Lu Buletin heard the screams of the troops up front. It sounded like they had suffered some casualties. Ren Xiaosu was hiding in the shadows of the forest and was very well hidden within the bushes. A centipede was crawling quickly towards him, but Ren Xiaosu stabbed it down into the soil with his dagger. Ren Xiaosu had changed into Sun Junzhen's private army uniform. He didn't put on a dead person's clothes because he was that poor but because the camouflage patterns would help him to stay well hidden in the forest. Soon after, he heard the sound of footsteps coming from in front. As he had not gone far, he could hear the consortium's platoon calling for backup from their comrades. For Ren Xiaosu, this was probably the best chance to sneak past the perimeter that was set up by the consortium. If they needed reinforcements on this side, the consortium's line of fire would gradually be concentrated here. At that time, openings would start appearing in the perimeter of defense. When he and Su Xianchu parted ways, there was no mention of where they would meet up again. At this point, they had tacitly chosen to act alone as they believed that their individual skills surpassed the strength of the group. But that alone was not enough to give them a reason to act solo. More importantly, they still did not trust each other. Everyone still had some scruples about the team when Yang Xiaojun was around. The three people kept each other in check and formed a temporary, stable alliance. But now that Yang Xiaojun had suddenly disappeared, it led to the immediate breakup of the group. Ren Xiaosu held his breath and waited for the oncoming platoon to pass him. It was obvious that the Qing consortium was more informed than Su Xianchu. They even knew what the chain-dragging monster was. Experimentals? People were conducting experiments in the depths of the mountains? Ren Xiaosu had some doubts, but he did not waste too much time thinking about this. After a supporting platoon passed him by, he headed towards the hinterlands of the Jing Mountains at a shockingly fast pace. During this time, Ren Xiaosu almost encountered another 2 platoons that responded to the call for reinforcements. Fortunately, he managed to avoid them in time. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu felt a little puzzled. They could not even kill one monster with so many people? Or, could it be that monster was too powerful? He did not care too much about that since he had to sneak past the inner perimeter first. Whether he was planning to escape from the Jing Mountains or explore its secrets, this was the best opportunity. As Ren Xiaosu galloped through the forest, the knotty roots and pitfalls in the ground were not an obstacle to his advancement. His travel speed in the forest had never been slowed by such obstacles before. Gradually, Ren Xiaosu could hear the sound of heavy machinery operating ahead of him. It seemed an ongoing excavation was being carried out at a huge site ahead. There was a hill in front of him. When Ren Xiaosu quietly climbed up to have a look at the other side, he was stunned. Frankly, he had not expected there would be such a lively place in the hinterlands of the Jing Mountains. He was surprised to see a dozen excavators digging up the soil about 500 meters behind the slope of the hill he was on. Then Ren Xiaosu saw something. It was not these dozen or so excavators that caught his interest but the magnificent sight of a city behind this slope. However, the city had been reduced to ruins. The dozen or so excavators were doing some digging near a pit that looked like it had just been blown up by the Qing consortium with their shaped charges. It looked like they were searching for something. In reality, the city in front of him was not considered a complete one. In fact, it was far from that. At the furthest point that was visible to him, the skyline of the city abruptly came to an end with the rest of it buried underneath mountains and earth. The jagged city from before the cataclysm was like a giant maze that got destroyed. Even though Ren Xiaosu could only see a part of it, he could already imagine how magnificent the city was in the past. He saw a relatively well-preserved metal sign hanging on a building with the characters Xiaolong Ganwan on it. Ren Xiaosu was a little puzzled. What sort of a name was Xiaolong Gan? Was it the idea of a carp turning into a dragon after jumping over a waterfall one? What a mysterious-sounding place! But before Ren Xiaosu could figure it out, the sign crumbled into pieces when the excavator touched it. Eons had passed, so everything was in a state of decay. For some reason, Ren Xiaosu was really looking forward to seeing this place. The tectonic movements that occurred had buried much of the pre-cataclysm civilization deep underground, but these plate tectonics were also responsible for the formation of the volcanoes in the Jing Mountains. Somehow, a huge city was preserved in this location. Although the buildings were all broken and in pieces, the main structure still existed. When Ren Xiaosu looked into the distance from the hilltop, he saw that some areas spaced several kilometers apart had already been excavated. However, some of the excavation sites had stopped halfway. It looked like they were searching for something. Once they found the excavated site was not what they were searching for, they would immediately stop work and identify a different location. Ren Xiaosu could sense that whatever the Qing consortium was searching for, it must be very important to them. Furthermore, they knew exactly what they were searching for. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu spotted a place heavily guarded by soldiers in the distance. Some cargo containers were stacked over there. Next to it, soldiers were injecting drugs into some unconscious animals before loading them into the containers one by one. Were these wild animals captured by the Qing consortium? Perhaps even these evolved beasts would find it difficult to escape the fate of being studied. Should I leave? Ren Xiaosu wondered as he felt he might not even have a chance to get near the target the Qing consortium was searching for. After all, he had already witnessed the might of the Qing consortium, so he knew it would be impossible for him to snatch the secret away from them. All of a sudden, Ren Xiaosu saw a young man in a white suit standing on the roof of a building overlooking the city. In the wilderness, that white suit was so spotless it would amaze anyone. A sight like this was just like a clash of violence and civility that would make it unforgettable to whoever witnessed it. But when Ren Xiaosu saw that young man standing atop the building, he did not find his clothing to be unsuitable or incongruous with the wilderness. That was because this person was not required to fight. He was probably the leader of the Qing consortium for this operation. Ren Xiaosu felt that this consortium's VIP really looked quite different from the others. He kept his head low as he was afraid that he would get discovered by the Qing consortium's troops. Over 1,000 troops had been mobilized just to handle the security in the vicinity of the excavation site. Ren Xiaosu felt that both he and Su Xianchu had underestimated the Qing consortium's determination to lock down the area. Ren Xiaosu looked around his surroundings with curiosity and wondered where Su Xianchu and Yang Xiajin were hiding. Although he could not see them, Ren Xiaosu knew that they must be around here somewhere. Time to get out of here, Ren Xiaosu told himself, not caring what the others would do. When he learned he could not get his hands on the secret of the Jing Mountains, the thought of making a retreat grew in his mind. If not, it would be quite pointless for him to stay here. As for the secret of the Jing Mountains, Yang Xiajin and Su Xianchu probably had a greater interest in that. Ren Xiaosu felt there wasn't a need to risk his life for this secret. If someone else here had all kinds of advanced skills, and Ren Xiaosu had dozens of basic or master skill duplication scrolls on hand, he might be willing to give it a try. Someone like that would be a real treasure trove for him. In reality, the most important thing was that Ren Xiaosu was seeing more and more of those buildings that had been excavated below ground. Some of them even collapsed at the lightest touch from the excavators. They had still been standing upright, but that was only because no one had touched them. He could still vaguely recognize some of the buildings exposed above ground based on their relatively intact store signs. For example, there were beauty salons, blind massage, and so on. Ren Xiaosu did not believe there would be anything too valuable here. And that was the main reason why he wanted to get out of here. When Ren Xiaosu saw those signs, he felt that his trust had been betrayed and his intelligence insulted. Upon recalling those things like the QR code, Xiao Long Gan, and the plastic doll, it was obvious they were not particularly rare things at all. He wondered what Su Xianchu and Yang Xiajin would think if they saw these sights. Anyway, Ren Xiaosu had had enough of it. After running all this way out here and experiencing so much danger, it was all for the sake of showing me this. Ren Xiaosu kept his head low as he quietly headed towards the side of the mountain. At present, he could still hear gunshots going off in the forest behind him. This meant the Qing consortium's troops had not successfully taken care of that monster yet. The gunshots were at least an assurance for Ren Xiaosu that the Qing consortium would definitely not have the time to deal with him at this moment. Although more soldiers were patrolling at the foot of the mountain, the problem was that these people were focusing on the excavation site nearby. The abandoned sites seemed to have already lost their value, and the soldiers did not even bother looking at them. However, Ren Xiaosu could make use of the sites abandoned by the consortium as an opening to sneak past the perimeter. The Qing consortium had cut down so many trees along the way that it was enough to pave the entire length of the road back to Stronghold 112. Ren Xiaosu had to admit he was impressed with what an organization was capable of. In a place like the wilderness, they could open up a path as they liked, and there was no need to consult with the wild animals living in the mountains. This led Ren Xiaosu to re-evaluate the capabilities of an organization. Importantly, this was only the combat troops of one stronghold. According to Yang Xiajin, an organization might control 10 to 20 strongholds in total. So if Ren Xiaosu escaped in the direction of Stronghold 112, whatever wild animals or the like along the way would have already been scared away. Although it would be a little more difficult to return to Stronghold 113 and required him to take a longer detour if he went this way, he had no other options since this was his best choice. As Ren Xiaosu quietly walked towards the other areas of this city, the natural ravines and ruined buildings exposed above ground became his best cover. He saw the ruins of a tall building that had collapsed and was broken into two sections. Ren Xiaosu had no doubt that there used to be people who could totally stand atop this tall building and get a bird's-eye view of the entire city before the cataclysm. In the past, Ren Xiaosu would often fantasize about what it would be like to stay in the stronghold with Yan Liuyuan when they were living in the town. But it seemed that, although the stronghold was bigger than this city in terms of area, the level of grandeur and prosperity in there was incomparable to this place. Of course, the grandeur and prosperity were things of the past. Now, only ruins and desolation were left here. Ren Xiaosu slid down the hill slope under the cover of the shadowy forest and saw some signs covered in dust scattered around the ruins. He muttered, "Why are there so many reflexology spa signs in this city? Did the past people enjoy washing their feet this much?" While walking between the abandoned city and the mountainside, Ren Xiaosu carefully avoided being caught in the line of sight of anyone. He was only about 500 meters away from the Qing Consortium's combat troops at this moment. As long as he carefully made use of the blind corners and buildings, he wouldn't get discovered by them. But as he proceeded, Ren Xiaosu started feeling like he could hardly walk anymore. He was surprised to see a well-preserved tobacco and liquor store on his left-hand side. Although a majority of the buildings had been crushed to dust during the earthquakes caused by tectonic shift, 30% of the buildings in the city still remained. Ren Xiaosu's eyes gleamed when he saw the tobacco and liquor store. Tobacco and liquor were scarce goods in town. Why else would a teacher like Zhang Jinglan not have cigarettes to smoke every day? The stock in this tobacco and liquor store was probably more than what Old Wang and Old Li had in their stores combined. If he could bring it all back, he could easily become the richest person in town. Ren Xiaosu stole a glance at the Qing Consortium's people. When he was sure no one was looking in his vicinity, he rushed into the store excitedly. He reached for the cigarettes on the counter. As there was a transparent plastic wrapper around the cigarette pack, Ren Xiaosu thought it would still be in a good condition since it was protected by an outer layer of plastic. But the moment he touched it, the cigarette pack disintegrated into powder along with it. Ren Xiaosu felt a pain in his heart. Just how long had these things been kept here? In fact, Ren Xiaosu did not know that cigarettes also had a shelf life. Although the tobacco factories never stated how long their cigarettes could be kept for, they would generally turn bad after more than 3 years of storage. After all, the packaging of the plastic seal could not be more simply done. Moreover, Ren Xiaosu had estimated there to be at least 5 tobacco and liquor stores on this street. Ren Xiaosu converted the prices and felt that humans from before the cataclysm were really rich. In his haste, Ren Xiaosu did not realize that tobacco was actually not a scarce commodity before the cataclysm. He turned around and looked at the bottles of liquor that were placed on the shelves against the wall. As they were not sealed in plastic packaging, the liquor was gone. All the bottles here were empty. It seemed that some of the liquor bottles had been scattered onto the ground and were in pieces, probably due to earthquakes, while some were still standing on the shelves. But when Ren Xiaosu opened one of the bottles, he found that the liquor in it had disappeared. He wondered how long it had been since the cataclysm happened. The liquor in the bottle had completely vaporized. Ren Xiaosu grumbled, "Didn't the wineries in the past know how to seal bottles better?" He refused to believe this as he took another well-preserved bottle and shook it. However, the liquor in the bottle was also gone without an exception. In fact, this kind of liquor needed to be processed with a specialized technology if it were to be preserved, such as sealing the bottle with wax. Otherwise, it wouldn't be uncommon for only half a bottle of liquor to be left after 50 years of storage. These days, the most expensive things in town were cigarettes, liquor, and medicine. Especially alcohol, which was banned. The townspeople were even more attracted to it. The more something was prohibited, the more valuable it became. When Ren Xiaosu saw these shops initially, he thought that he had found a huge treasure trove. But now, he realized that his thoughts were pure fantasy. The cataclysm was like a gigantic sword that cut between the old and new civilizations. Ren Xiaosu thought that if both the tobacco and liquor products he found were already like this, there would be even less of a need to mention the medicine. Earlier, he was thinking of checking out a pharmacy if he saw one. But now, it seemed like there was no need for that anymore. Ren Xiaosu started thinking seriously as he walked out onto the street. Was there anything that did not have a shelf life? Or rather, something that could last for over 100 years? He suddenly saw the name of a shop next to him called Family Planning and Healthcare, but he did not go in. After all, in his opinion, it should just be a shop selling healthcare products. But what healthcare products could be kept that long? He felt reassured when he saw that the Qing Consortium's people had not shifted their attention over to his side yet. Ren Xiaosu could still hear gunshots coming from the outer perimeter. He wondered if that experimental was really that powerful. But all of a sudden, he thought of something. Aren't metals able to last hundreds of years without decomposing? Ren Xiaosu whipped his head around. He had heard from Wang Fugui before that there were jewelry shops inside the stronghold. In that case, there must also be jewelry shops in a city as large as this. Ren Xiaosu, a little downtrodden before this, had his morale lifted again. Gold was still a hard currency even in these times. Ren Xiaosu had asked Zhang Jinglin why gold was still needed as a hard currency after the Qing Consortium's bank had issued its own currency. Zhang Jinglin smiled and answered, because it's not only the Qing Consortium that has issued their own currency. Perhaps that currency is usable within the Qing Consortium's territories, but it'll be useless once you go to another stronghold that's not controlled by them. At that time, there's a need for something that can be conveniently measured and valued to replace your paper money. In fact, the corporations used currency as a method to control the various strongholds. They allowed people to get used to the convenience of using paper money, but they had the final say in how much currency was issued. This was the real lifeline of the economy and one of the fundamentals of a corporation. However, Zhang Jinglin explained, because of the currency circulation problem, several consortiums have come together to form the Monetary Management Committee. Everyone has strict regulations on the issuance of money so that there will be no chaos in the world. They are all on friendly terms at the moment, but who can guarantee that it'll remain the same? When Ren Xiaosu remembered Zhang Jinglin's words, the more he felt that Zhang Jinglin was no ordinary person. No one knew where the school teacher came from, and he had lived in the town outside of Stronghold 113 for many years. Ren Xiaosu decided he would carefully watch Zhang Jinglin after he got back to town. He started exploring further up in front away from the Qing Consortium's people as he tried to find the existence of any jewelry shops or the like. If there were any jewelry shops still standing, wouldn't he become rich? In the backyard of the school in town, Zhang Jinglin had just returned after a day of lessons. He saw Yan Liuyuan, who had already stepped out of his room and was basking in the sun. He smiled and said, "Have you fully recovered?" "Yes." Yan Liuyuan nodded as he smiled and said, "Teacher, big sister Xiaoyu, thank you for taking care of me in this period of time." Yan Liuyuan was in a fantastic mood at this moment. It was not because of recovering from illness, but that he knew why it had not deteriorated. This meant Ren Xiaosu did not need to depend on much of Yan Liuyuan's luck so far. In other words, Ren Xiaosu had not encountered any real danger. At this moment, Xiaoyu came in from outside the school, holding a basket. When she saw Yan Liuyuan, she said in surprise, "Liuyuan, have you fully recovered already? Go into your room. Don't catch a cold." Yan Liuyuan looked adorably cute as he smiled and said, "Big sister Xiaoyu, I'm fine. You can rest easy now. What are we having for dinner? I'll fry some eggs and vegetables for you too." Xiaoyu smiled and said, "I went to town earlier and bought some fatty meat. I can use it as an oil substitute for frying the dishes so that you too can have a taste of meat." "All right," Yan Liuyuan responded. But as he walked out of the yard, he said, "I'm going out for a while and will be back before sunset." Xiaoyu was about to stop him, but when she turned around, Yan Liuyuan had already disappeared. As she waited in worry at the gated entrance to the school, Zhang Jinglin thought to himself, weren't you getting ready to cook just now? How much longer are you going to wait there? However, he was too embarrassed to say anything. To Zhang Jinglin, the two brothers were not people who would easily end up on the losing side. When they were out on the streets, it should be other people who had to worry. Just a moment ago, Zhang Jinglin clearly saw Yan Liuyuan taking a kitchen knife and hiding it within his bosom. Whose child would bring a kitchen knife with them when they went out? Would this be the behavior of a decent kid? But Yan Liuyuan really did return before dark. Both Zhang Jinglin and Xiaohu did not know where he had gone. When they asked him, he did not say anything and smiled before changing the subject. There were 3 rooms in the backyard of the school, but one of them was used as the kitchen. Of the remaining 2, one was Zhang Jinglin's room while the other was occupied by Yan Liuyuan and Xiaohu. In the evening, Xiaohu would make the bed for Yan Liuyuan while she laid on the bedroll and slept on the floor. As it was almost winter now, the floor was freezing. However, Xiaohu never said anything about it. After turning off the kerosene lamp, Xiaohu suddenly asked Yan Liuyuan, "Do you think your brother is safe?" Yan Liuyuan said with a smile, "Don't worry, he's definitely safe." Xiaohu was stunned. She did not understand why Yan Liuyuan was so confident. "Don't worry, I won't do it again," Yan Liuyuan promised. Recently, he had gotten increasingly trustful of Xiaohu because she continued caring for him even though she had the opportunity to leave him behind. As he was running a high fever several days ago, Xiaohu could have just taken the money and left, but she did not do that. While he was sleeping, there would always be a fresh and cool towel wiping his face and armpits to keep his temperature down. Yan Liuyuan even heard a gentle singing voice that felt like a warm ocean and reminded him of a child being held in its mother's arms. Yan Liuyuan had never experienced any of these feelings before. Even though Ren Xiaosu also provided him with a lot of warmth and care, it felt like he was always chasing after his elder brother. It did not feel like an embrace. "Okay." Xiaohu felt reassured after hearing Yan Liuyuan's promise. She thought of something and said, "Since you've recovered from your illness, you have to attend class tomorrow to catch up." Yan Liuyuan paled at the mention. "Big sister Xiaohu, surely that's unnecessary. My brother isn't around anyway." "That won't do." Xiaohu said, "It'll be my fault if Xiaosu comes back and finds out that you've fallen behind on your homework. He told me before he left." "When did he tell you that?" Yan Liuyuan wailed, "I never heard him mentioning anything about it at all." Xiaohu giggled while lying on the bedroll. "Anyway, I don't care. You must be obedient." Yan Liuyuan lost the will to argue as he stared at the ceiling, but there was a slight smile on his lips. At this moment, he heard someone jump into the courtyard, and it was not just one person. Xiaohu also heard the sound. But the usually gentle and timid Xiaohu took out a bone knife from under her pillow. She clenched her teeth and said, "Stay still." In the dimly lit room, Yan Liuyuan could see Xiaohu trembling a little. They both knew that someone leaping over the yard's wall at such a late time must have come with evil purposes. But as Ren Xiaosu was not around, Xiaohu felt that she should bear the responsibility of protecting Yan Liuyuan. A second later, 3 burly men kicked open the door to their room. 2 of them tried to hold Xiaohu against the ground while the other man stabbed at Yan Liuyuan, who was lying in bed with a bone knife. Although Xiaohu was also holding a bone knife, her strength as a woman was a lot weaker compared to that of an adult man. When one of the burly men jumped her, he let out a groan like he had been stabbed by her bone knife. However, the other man kicked it out of her hand. Yan Liuyuan looked at them with the aid of the moonlight. In that instant, he recognized that these 3 men were some of the idlers in town. He had never unexpected they would target the school. Perhaps they thought Ren Xiaosu had earned some money after opening the clinic some time ago. Furthermore, Ren Xiaosu was not in town at the moment, so they started getting ideas to commit a crime. Xiaohu was very cautious whenever she spent any money during this period. Every time she bought her groceries from the market, she would haggle over the price for a long time. She would even resort to picking wild vegetables so she could pretend she was broke. However, Yan Liuyuan needed nutrition when he was ill. In the end, she still bought some meat, and that attracted the attention of others. This was what was scary about a home without a man. Although Yan Liuyuan was also a man, he was too young to be intimidating to others. As Yan Liuyuan and Xiao likely had a lot of money with them now, not even the thought of this being a school could hinder the robbers from targeting them. At the same time, Yan Liuyuan heard the door beside their room being kicked open. It seemed like someone else was attempting to kill Zhang Jinglin. These people were so reckless they even dared to touch the schoolteacher. They wanted to silence everyone so no one would know who the culprits were. However, right at this moment, a gunshot rang through the night. The idler who had rushed at Yan Liuyuan stared disbelievingly at the black muzzle of the pistol before him. Then he looked down at his bleeding abdomen. He couldn't understand why Yan Liuyuan had a gun in his hand. If they knew that Yan Liuyuan had a gun, they would definitely not have taken the risk to rob them. In fact, guns were prohibited in town. Some people had built their own guns before, but they were all confiscated by the stronghold. Everyone in the room looked at Yan Liuyuan in surprise. Even Xiao had not expected it. In an instant, 6 gunshots were fired off. After Yan Liuyuan killed one person, he did not get frightened. Instead, he shot the 2 idlers who had rushed Xiao and killed them as well. Every time Yan Liuyuan fired a shot, he felt like a darkness in his heart was pulling him slowly into the abyss. In this world, if you want to live, you must know how to kill. He jumped out of bed and ran out of the door. The 2 idlers who had just barged into Zhang Jinglin's room next door ran out when they heard the gunshots, but it was already too late. Another 2 gunshots rang out. Yan Liuyuan had opened fire and killed 5 people in the space of 1 minute. The sound of the gunshots cracked through the air and spread outwards like a howling roar. Mr. Zhang walked out of the room next door and gazed at Yan Liuyuan, who was standing next to him, as though he was getting to know this young man again. Zhang Jinglin knew that Ren Xiaosu was a ruthless person and even knew that Yan Liuyuan had been deeply influenced by Ren Xiaosu over the years. Although Yan Liuyuan belonged to the youngest batch of students in the school, the older children did not dare provoke him and were even afraid of him. But whose 13-year-old child would know how to shoot and kill? He stood there panting in a pool of blood outside the room. As his expression was always calm, you would only realize he was actually afraid if you saw his hands trembling slightly. Xiao came out of their room as well. She hugged Yan Liuyuan and said, "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid." It was obvious that Yan Liuyuan had stepped up to save everyone. But for some reason, Yan Liuyuan felt relieved when Xiao embraced him. Her warm touch dispersed the coldness throughout his body. The loud and crisp gunshots had jolted the entire town awake. Everyone came out and looked in the direction of the school, but they still did not know what had happened. It was clear that the stronghold's residents had already returned into the stronghold. So why were there gunshots? Based on the refugees' knowledge, only the important people of the stronghold could possess firearms. Zhang Jinglin looked at the gun in Yan Liuyuan's hand and said with a sigh, "Did Ren Xiaosu leave that gun for you? You went out in the afternoon because you wanted to retrieve it." "Yes." Yan Liuyuan said, "I'll leave town with big sister Xiao right away. We won't burden you." When Ren Xiaosu left town, he broke away from the team for a while to go to the place where the gun was buried. But instead of taking it away, he marked the spot where it was buried and left it to Yan Liuyuan. Before he departed, he quietly told Yan Liuyuan to retrieve the gun after he went away. If he encountered any danger that he could not fight against, he should use the gun and then escape into the wilderness. He had prepared a secret cave somewhere in the wilderness for Yan Liuyuan to take refuge in. When Ren Xiaosu was finished with his business, he would go and look for him. Zhang Danti hoped to get lucky, and leave immediately at the sign of any trouble. In Ren Xiaosu's opinion, nothing was more important in this world than staying alive. It was better to have a gun for self-defense than having nothing at all. Ren Xiaosu also wished that he could bring the gun with him into the Jing Mountains. But compared to his own safety, he felt that it was better to leave the gun for Yan Liuyuan. It was just that Yan Liuyuan and Ren Xiaosu could not have expected something would happen so soon after Yan Liuyuan had retrieved the gun. At this moment, Yan Liuyuan was actually not worried for himself. This was because he believed the place Ren Xiaosu had prepared for him would be safe and sound. He also believed that Ren Xiaosu would be back for him. What he was worried about was Ren Xiaosu. Ever since Yan Liuyuan gained his power of affecting luck, he suffered the side effects of making a wish several times. Therefore, he knew well that those side effects were not simply a sickness. Yan Liuyuan looked in the direction of the Jing Mountains with a frown. He knew that Ren Xiaosu must have encountered danger, and it was definitely something extremely dangerous too. This was his inexorable destiny, and this was the cause and effect of him making a wish. Ren Xiaosu, there was a pent-up feeling in Yan Liuyuan's heart. In times of danger, these two brothers would always be worrying about each other's safety instead of their own. Big sister Xiaoyu, come with me. Yan Liuyuan turned around and went into the house to pick up some clothes before getting ready to head out of the school. Xiaoyu did not even ask where they were going. She just took the money out from between the bricks on the ground and followed him. But Zhang Jinglan caught his arm and stopped him. Zhang Jinglan sighed and said, "It's not safe out there in the wilderness. You don't have to escape. Let me handle it for you." "Let you handle it?" Yan Liuyuan didn't understand what Zhang Jinglan meant. While they were talking, he even thought of breaking free from Zhang Jinglan's grasp. However, he discovered that Zhang Jinglan was much stronger than he had thought and couldn't break free from him. Zhang Jinglan said, "The wolf pack has already returned. The place Ren Xiaosu prepared for you is very well hidden, but it won't escape the wolves' noses. I'm afraid that Ren Xiaosu probably did not expect the wolf pack to return so soon either." Yan Liuyuan had some doubts. Why did Zhang Jinglan know the wolves were back? There was clearly no one in town who had sighted the wolf pack or heard any news about it. Meanwhile, the stronghold's gate was being raised. Soon after, Zhang Jinglan and the others could hear the sound of footsteps. It looked like the gunshots had also alarmed those in the stronghold, and the private army's troops had come out to check. The town started stirring, and the nocturnal commotion made all the refugees crawl out of bed. Everyone came out onto the street and looked in the direction of the school where there were some movements. Some of the more daring ones even headed over to the school to check out what was happening. Zhang Jinglan waited silently. Not long after, someone kicked open the front door of the school. Wang Kongyang led a squad of troops and walked in. He observed the surroundings and had a look at the 5 corpses lying on the ground, then looked over at Zhang Jinglan. At this moment, the gun was in Zhang Jinglan's hand. Wang Kongyang smiled and said, "The pistol was indeed taken by that kid, Ren Xiaosu. I've been thinking about it for a very long time. There isn't anyone else in town who has the balls to go and get their hands on a gun. Only he would dare to do something like that." Zhang Jinglan and the others did not say anything. Xiaoyu looked anxiously at Zhang Jinglan as though she was worried he couldn't handle the situation before him. From outside, Wang Fugui came running in with his clothes all haphazard. He smiled and said in a servile manner to Wang Kongyang, "Sir, there must be a mistake somewhere." "There isn't any mistake." Wang Kongyang shook his head. "I'm quite certain Wang Dongyang was killed by Ren Xiaosu." Wang Fugui took a stack of money out of his pocket at the words and tried to push it onto Wang Kongyang. "You're not really on good terms with Wang Dongyang anyway, so whether or not he was really killed by Ren Xiaosu, maybe we should give this matter some further thought." "Ha ha ha," Wang Kongyang laughed and shoved Wang Fugui aside. "Do you think I'm like the others from the stronghold who only have eyes for money? Round them all up. I'll wait for Ren Xiaosu to come back and see how he explains himself." Though pushed aside, Wang Fugui came up to him again. As a result, Wang Kongyang pulled his pistol out of its holster and pointed it right at Wang Fugui's temple. "Stay away, understand?" Then Wang Kongyang was taken aback, because he saw Zhang Jinglan take some papers out of his pocket. Zhang Jinglan said, "Bring this into the stronghold and let Fatty Luo come and see me." Wang Kongyang looked at Zhang Jinglan with suspicion. This was because Zhang Jinglan's tone was too calm for this situation. In the vicinity of Stronghold 113, Zhang Jinglan was probably the only person Wang Kongyang had met in his life who dared to call Boss Luo Fatty Luo. Zhang Jinglan did not explain what the papers were. In the past, Wang Kongyang had taken notice of Zhang Jinglan. He felt that Zhang Jinglan was no ordinary person, but he did not delve any deeper into it. Honestly, it did not matter to him whether Zhang Jinglan was normal or not. But it was different now. He realized he had been embroiled into the mystery of Zhang Jinglan's identity now. As such, Wang Kongyang was even a little afraid to take the red documentation from Zhang Jinglan. It looked a little aged, and the outside covering was slightly damaged. Zhang Jinglan handed his documentation to Wang Kongyang. "Here you go, bring it to him and he'll understand. This isn't something that you can handle anymore. Watch them," Wang Kongyang told the private troops beside him. It wouldn't do to get others to run this errand. He would need to head back to the stronghold personally and look for Boss Luo himself. And yet he was afraid he had been fooled. Based on Wang Kongyang's meticulous nature, it was absolutely necessary to keep the soldiers behind to watch over Zhang Jinglan and Yan Liuyuan. Xiaoyu looked over at Zhang Jinglan in worry. "Mr. Zhang, will it be all right?" Zhang Jinglan waved it off. "Don't worry, nothing will happen. They wouldn't dare to do anything to me yet." Yan Liuyuan whispered from next to him, "Sorry, teacher." If he had not fired the gun, Zhang Jinglan wouldn't have had to expose his identity. Zhang Jinglan gave him a glance and sighed. "You were not in the wrong. It's this world's fault. Besides, I still have to thank you. You only did it because you wanted to save me." In Zhang Jinglan's opinion, he did not think that Yan Liuyuan had done anything wrong. If he hadn't fired the gun, it would have ended tragically for both Liuyuan and Xiaoyu, as well as himself. This was because Zhang Jinglan was simply a normal teacher now. Did Yan Liuyuan show off his fortune? No. Did Yan Liuyuan kill the wrong people? No. Zhang Jinglan suddenly felt that Yan Liuyuan was quite similar to Ren Xiaosu in some ways. He was ruthless like Ren Xiaosu, he was cold to his enemies like Ren Xiaosu, and he always had precaution for this world like Ren Xiaosu did. In the past, Zhang Jinglan felt that it wasn't good for Ren Xiaosu to be this way. But for some reason, he started thinking Ren Xiaosu was much more human than most people after interacting with him for some time. This might sound a little wrong, but it was what Zhang Jinglan thought. It had been many years, and this was the first time someone had been killed at the school. Of course, it was also because this event was so odd that it made Yan Liuyuan worry even more about Ren Xiaosu. Wang Kongyang ran back into the stronghold. Along the way, he pored over the documentation for himself. He saw the words Stronghold 178, Zhang Jinglan written on the inside. Wang Kongyang gasped. He had never come across any identification like this before. Shouldn't such papers only indicate one's identity and the jobs they did? It might also include the date of birth, a photo, and any other relevant details to easily verify someone's identity. But this identification was different. Anyone who saw it would immediately know who it belonged to. And at this moment, when Wang Kongyang thought about the person from Stronghold 178 who had been rumored to be missing for over a decade, he picked up the pace. However, Wang Kongyang wasn't high-ranking enough, so he wasn't sure if his guess was correct. Wang Kongyang did not go to the Stronghold's overseers but drove straight to Luolan's residence. In truth, everyone knew that Luolan was just a businessman. But whenever something major happened in the Stronghold, they would all go and look for him. The overseers of the stronghold had already accepted this as fact. Luolan's residence was located in the dead center of the stronghold. From the time Wang Kongyang entered the stronghold, he drove nearly an hour before he reached it, and this was even in the dead of the night when there were no pedestrians or traffic on the roads. He arrived outside Luolan's residence, or rather, a large military base. At the entrance of the base stood a stone monument, red words carved on it, Military Zone. The consortium's combat brigade, dressed in black uniforms, handled the security at the entrance. Every one of them was issued with live ammunition and was ready to fight at any time. Before Wang Kongyang's vehicle could get close, he could already see spotlights shining down on him from the military base's tall walls. Wang Kongyang flashed his identification at the entrance and said, "I'm Wang Kongyang from the private army. There's something I have urgently need Boss Luo for. It's a matter regarding Stronghold 178. At this moment, Wang Kongyang could feel no less than 10 rifles pointing at him. Someone from the consortium's military walked over and said indifferently, "Identification." In the face of the consortium's military, the private army's troops were inferior. Therefore, even though Wang Kongyang was being aimed at with rifles, he did not dare to say anything about it. Wang Kongyang handed both his and Zhang Jinglan's identification papers over. The soldier responsible for checking them returned inside and came out again after more than 10 minutes. "Your identity has been verified. You're free to enter." The main entrance of the military base was finally opened to Wang Kongyang. The Qing Consortium's military might had always been considered the best, and they were also very disciplined and had an extremely strong combat capability. However, martial law wasn't implemented in the past. It was only after the appearance of a supernatural being who tried to kill a stronghold overseer that the various corporations raised the level of martial law around the strongholds. In the end, the entire military base illuminated not long after Wang Kongyang came in. The sound of sharp marching could be clearly heard, and the stronghold residents living near the base woke up in alarm. They still did not know what had happened at the military base, but the sound of the marching was clearly from the assembly of the combat brigade. A black off-road vehicle sped out from the stronghold, and it was even followed by 3 military trucks. The trucks were carrying 3 squads. "Are they going to war?" someone said when they saw this scene from their house's window. "Who is the Qing Consortium going to war with? But if they're really going to war, surely they can't just be mobilizing such a small force, right?" someone said in doubt. "I think it was Boss Luo sitting in the off-road vehicle just now. That guy hasn't left the base in 2 years, so what could have alarmed him this time?" But the person most shocked was still Wang Kongyang. This was because he saw Luo Lan jump in panic when he received Zhang Jinglan's identification from him. Shortly after, the entire military base seemingly entered a wartime state as sophisticated machines of war were deployed in an instant. It was at this moment that Wang Kongyang could confirm that Zhang Jinglan might be the person he guessed he was. If he really was that person, what made him appear in this place? The Qing Consortium's convoy headed straight for the stronghold gate. Yan Liuyuan and the others were still waiting in the schoolyard. He suddenly turned his head to Zhang Jinglan and asked, "Teacher, what did you do before you became a teacher?" Yan Liuyuan also understood that Mr. Zhang's identity was scarily important. Zhang Jinglan smiled and said, "I was a soldier." Yan Liuyuan was stunned. It didn't occur to him that Mr. Zhang Jinglan would be any kind of soldier he knew. Curious, Yan Liuyuan asked, "Then why didn't you continue being a soldier?" Zhang Jinglan went silent for a long while at the question. He was apparently perplexed as well. Zhang Jinglan finally answered after thinking about it for a long time, "Because war will not save humanity." "Are you leaving?" Yan Liuyuan asked. "That's right." Zhang Jinglan nodded. "There are still people waiting for me in the northern frontier." All of a sudden, Yan Liuyuan realized Zhang Jinglan had chosen Ren Xiaosu to be the substitute teacher as he had really wanted him to become the school's new teacher, because Zhang Jinglan had planned on leaving. Even without tonight's incident, Zhang Jinglan would probably not have stayed much longer. Why do you want to go back to the northern frontier? Yan Liuyuan asked. Because this world is starting to get a little different. I need to be with those who are waiting for me, Zhang Jinglan explained. What's in the northern frontier? Yan Liuyuan kept asking questions. He and Ren Xiaosu had never been to the place before, and it was said to be far off in the northwest. Yan Liuyuan recalled the time Mr. Zhang got distracted in class. On that day, Mr. Zhang was looking out of the window at the sky and saying, "The spring snow and ice in the northern frontier has yet to melt, so there isn't any greenery, only sandstorms and yellow earth. The snow in the northern frontier is vast and white, and humanity is very lonely." At that time, although Mr. Zhang had described the northern frontier as a bleak and desolate place, Yan Liuyuan could sense his yearning and nostalgia for it. It was only upon recalling this that Yan Liuyuan understood those feelings. So it was because Zhang Jinglan came from there. What's in the northern frontier? There's cigarettes to smoke. Zhang Jinglan said with a smile. Don't be afraid. They wouldn't dare do anything to me. They won't be able to try anything funny and will only send me back to stronghold 178 in the end. Yan Liuyuan nodded. He thought to himself how Ren Xiaosu would not be able to nag him to do his homework in the future. The town wouldn't even have a teacher anymore. However, Yan Liuyuan didn't feel as happy as before when he thought about not having to do any more homework in the future. The person on the other end of the call fell silent for a moment. Has it been verified? It's not verified yet, but if it's true, should I kill him? Luolan seemed to be seeking the other person's opinion. Why does this old boy have to hide in my territory of all places? From his tone, it sounded like Luolan considered Zhang Jinglan a hot potato of sorts. Everyone usually felt that Luolan was always smiling and easy to approach, but the smart ones all knew that Luolan wasn't that different from his crazy younger brother. They were both thick-skinned and black-hearted murderers. If Yan Liuyuan heard what Luolan asked, he would be extremely worried for Zhang Jinglan. However, the person on the other end of the satellite call asked, "Kill him." "That's right," Fatty Luo said. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A lot of people have now heard he's still alive, right?" The person on the other end said, "Don't you think that, if you kill him now, that damned group from Stronghold 178 might even abandon their stronghold and come over to kill you?" Luolan actually shivered at the words. "I can get it done without causing a scene. There's no such thing as an impervious wall in this world." The other person said, "Send him back to Stronghold 178. Isn't someone guarding the northern frontier for us better? Even if he has to die, it cannot be to the hands of our Qing consortium, much less by your hand." "But what if one day, Luolan hesitated. "It won't be too late to kill him at that time. For now, we'll let others get a headache over this." The person on the other end sounded unquestionably firm. He then seemed to think of something. "By the way, I'm at the Jing Mountains. Is there a refugee from your place named Ren Xiaosu?" Luolan froze, "The one who sells medicine." This time, it was the person on the other end who was surprised. "What about selling medicine?" "Who's selling medicine?" "It's nothing," Luolan said with some diffidence. "Did you discover anything in the Jing Mountains?" "I only found out 2 days ago that old Lu from our stronghold 113 secretly sent a squad of private troops to the Jing Mountains. They were even traveling under the pretense of being a band." "How childish! I actually quite liked the female singer. It's such a waste that she's probably going to die in the Jing Mountains." "Oh, the female singer you're talking about, she's not dead yet," the person on the other end said with a laugh. "So Ren Xiaosu is the one who sells medicine and Luo Xinyu is the singer, but who is Yang Xiaojun?" "Yang Xiaojun? I've never even heard of that name before," Luolan muttered. "Discover anything in the Jing Mountains?" "I'm close to locating the research lab from before the cataclysm." The person on the other end said, "But, bro, you can take a back seat in Stronghold 113. You shouldn't be questioning me on such matters." Oh. Luo Lan fell silent for a moment. In a normal family, the elder brother would usually have more say over things. However, Boss Luo had absolutely no authority before his younger brother. "One more question." The person on the other end asked, "How long has it been since Luo Xinyu became a singer at your stronghold?" "About 2 years." Luo Lan replied. "Then does that Ren Xiaosu have any friends or relatives?" the person on the other end asked. "I think he has a younger brother," Luo Lan said. Then he turned to Wang Kongyang, who was beside him, and asked, "Does that Ren Xiaosu have any friends or relatives?" Wang Kongyang froze. "This Zhang Jinglan is his friend." Luo Lan was taken aback. "How coincidental. Then don't touch his brother. They're just refugees." The person on the other end sounded less hostile. "While you're sending Zhang Jinglan back to the northern frontier, ship old Lu off from your stronghold 113 as well. He has no place over there anymore." Luo Lan muttered, "Why don't we just kill him? It's so much more trouble sending him away. Just do as I say." With a click, the other person hung up. Wang Kongyang, who was sitting next to Luo Lan, did not say a word. He had not expected these two brothers could decide the fate of a stronghold overseer with just a call. So this was what an organization could do. At this time, it had also turned dark in the Jing Mountains. The Qing Consortium troops had erected huge spotlights around the excavation sites, with one shining in each of the 4 cardinal directions, illuminating the entire city in the valley. The consortium was very experienced at combat operations, so they were used to treating every mission as a real battle. The only difference was that some battles were more major than others. And the most important factors in a battle were intelligence and reconnaissance. After the young man dressed in a white suit hung up, he looked at Lu Buletin and Luo Xinyu, who were in front of him, with a smile. It had been several hours since the battle between the combat troops and the experimental ended. Only afterwards were Lu Buletin and Luo Xinyu taken to this ruined city. "I forgot to introduce myself earlier." The young man in the white suit said with a smile, "I am Qing Zhen of the Qing Consortium, also known as Luo Lan's younger brother. I'm very happy to meet you too, my guests, Mr. Lu Buletin and Ms. Luo Xinyu." Lu Buletin and Luo Xinyu's hands had been secured behind their backs with plastic ties. This did not make them feel like they were guests at all. Lu Buletin suddenly said, "Everything that I said just now is true. I didn't hide anything. Su Xianchu is a supernatural being, and Yang Xiaojin is also very likely one. But the person you have to be wariest of is that Ren Xiaosu. I suggest you kill him on the spot if you encounter him. Their motives in coming to the Jing Mountains definitely aren't innocent. I'm sure they're trying to infringe on the interests of the Qing Consortium. I'm very familiar with Boss Luo, so you mustn't kill me." Qing Zhen thought for a moment before asking, "Have you two heard about that schoolteacher from town, Zhang Jinglan?" Lu Buletin was startled. "I've heard Ren Xiaosu mention him a few times before. But why are you asking about this? Is it Zhang Jinglan who has a problem? That Ren Xiaosu seems to be very close to Zhang Jinglan, so there has to be a problem with him." Lu Buletin was getting flustered and panicky. He was answering almost every question posed to him. Usually, the members of the consortium were gentlemanly and refined, and there was always a very graceful demeanor about them when they attended galas or parties. But right now, they were surrounded by countless troops. These soldiers were all standing as still as statues, yet keeping an eye on all that was going on around them. The gentleman revealed his fangs and muscularity all of a sudden, as his malicious nature that was usually hidden under his elegant exterior reared its head. Lu Buletin had only heard of Qing Zhen because of Boss Luo. Many of Stronghold 113's residents had secretly talked about this pair of strange brothers. However, Qing Zhen's reputation was not good because he was always the one handling the Qing Consortium's assassinations in recent years. According to what many people say, Qing Zhen was a demon who skinned his dead victims. Another group was the bums, with people such as Luo Lan, who just needed to be kept alive and be well fed in a stronghold. They were not expected to excel and just stayed around until they died. Yet another type were the shadows. Like Qing Zhen, who did all the dirty work yet had hardly anything to do with the inheritance of the consortium. He tended to earn the most money. Normally, an illegitimate child like Luo Lan would not be qualified to take control of a stronghold, yet Qing Zhen was able to help him do so. Or maybe Luo Lan's competitors did not dare to vie with him for control of the stronghold as they either feared Qing Zhen or relied on him for certain things. It was the first time the Qing Consortium had placed an illegitimate child in the controlling position of a stronghold, which demonstrated Qing Zhen's standing within the consortium. Qing Zhen looked at Lu Buletin and Luo Xinyu and said, "Tell me about those three people." "I'm talking about Su Xianchu, Yang Xiaojun, and Ren Xiaosu." Is Ren Xiaosu related to Yang Xiaojun in any way? It sounds like they're pretty compatible based on their names. No, they're not related. Lu Buletin shook his head. Ren Xiaosu is just a refugee from outside the stronghold. We forced him to be the guide for our expedition. He has great strength, so I suspect he might also be a supernatural being. Qing Zhen shook his head. So it's just his strength that's a little greater. Isn't that enough? He's capable of lifting up a full-grown man single-handed. Lu Buletin said anxiously, and that Su Xianchu, even though his stamina and strength are quite normal, his power is to create a shadow clone of himself. That shadow clone can even shield him from bullets. Qing Zhen got interested. He ordered someone next to him, "Take notes. Su Xianchu, supernatural being who hasn't reached his full potential, danger rating, see Ren Xiaosu, suspected strength type supernatural being, danger rating, F." There were not only combat troops surrounding Qing Zhen, but also many researchers in hazmat suits. One of them was even responsible for making note of the decisions Qing Zhen make. All of a sudden, Lu Buletin realized that Qing Zhen was actually more interested in Su Xianchu. It seemed like he didn't really care about Ren Xiaosu. So Ren Xiaosu is also considered a supernatural being? Then you should hurry up and capture him, Lu Buletin said. All this while, Luo Xinyu, who was beside him, hadn't said a word. Qing Zhen laughed. "We'll definitely capture him. I believe they must be in the city right now. But there's nothing rare about strength-type supernatural beings." At this moment, be it Lu Buletin or Luo Xinyu, they both realized that Qing Consortium's understanding of supernatural beings was definitely not on a superficial level. It seemed that the Qing Consortium had gained a very deep understanding of these supernatural beings. But upon some thought, it wasn't that surprising. The world was under the control of the organizations, so it was also quite normal they would have an advanced understanding of such secrets. They had many more resources, as well as the power of information. But it felt like even the Qing Consortium was unable to fully define the level of powers that a supernatural being had. They could only use danger ratings to rank them. This danger rating was probably assessed based on what could threaten the consortium, right? So, for example, Su Xianchu, who could summon a shadow clone to battle on his behalf, was assessed to be a C-class danger due to the bullet-blocking ability it had, while Ren Xiaosu, who only had greater strength than normal, was ignored. No matter how strong one was, could they possibly overcome firearms and explosives? Fists and kicks were ultimately no match for guns and cannons. In the eyes of the organizations, if someone's strength didn't surpass the power of a firearm, then the supernatural being's destructive powers would be limited. This was because the vast majority of firearms were still controlled by the organizations. Qing Zhen was now sure that Ren Xiaosu was a refugee from the town outside of the stronghold, Su Xianchu was an officer of the private army, while Yang Xiaojun's origins remained unknown. Of course, even though Luolan had told him about them personally, he still might not believe his words. He was always the type who liked to verify the truth for himself. Lu Buletin could not really understand. Compared to Ren Xiaosu and Su Xianchu, Qing Zhen was clearly more interested in Yang Xiaojun. According to Lu Buletin, Yang Xiaojun was very well informed about the Pyro Company and other organizations. Therefore, this made Yang Xiaojun's identity far more complicated than Su Xianchu and Ren Xiaosu. Qing Zhen was currently standing in the ruins of the city. With the destroyed civilization and tough combatants of the consortium around him, his white suit remained spotlessly clean. He asked with great interest, "Has Yang Xiaojun shown herself to have any types of special skills?" "Yang Xiaojun doesn't have any special skills." Lu Buletin thought about it carefully for a long time. It felt like other than being decisive and ruthless, Yang Xiaojun was just a girl who didn't exhibit any trace of special skills. If Ren Xiaosu were here, he would have none of it. Those advanced jump rope and advanced nursery rhyme singing skills were both very impressive skills. Surely that was special enough, right? But of course, Ren Xiaosu wasn't here right now. By this point, he had located the jewelry shop he was longing to find. Qing Zhen did not get the answer he desired, so he looked at Lu Buletin seriously and said, "Think harder." For some reason, Lu Buletin suddenly felt an oppressive force come over him. He clenched his teeth and said, "Yang Xiaojun really doesn't have any special skills. Instead, I think you should raise your guard against Ren Xiaosu." "Oh." Qing Zhen nodded. He turned to look at Luo Xinyu. Just what is so special about this Ren Xiaosu that Lu Buletin cannot take his mind off him? Could it be that he has some special skills other than his strength? Luo Xinyu froze. Ren Xiaosu's special skill? She gave it some thought before venturing, maybe he's quite skilled at annoying people. Luo Xinyu was not making this up. In fact, she felt deeply about this. But when Qing Zhen heard this, he laughed. He said to the person beside him, "Su Man, bring a team and seek these 3 people out. Get back here before 12 midnight. Affirmative. The soldier named Su Man led 6 platoons off, using 180 men to deal with 3 people. This was probably the highest form of treatment even within the Qing consortium. As Qing Zhen's trusted aide, Su Man understood the secret of the Jing Mountains must not be leaked. Everyone who was an outsider today would not be allowed to walk away from here. Qing Zhen stood still and started humming a song. He had apparently relaxed. However, Lu Buletin and Luo Xinyu did not feel the same way. Luo Xinyu couldn't resist testing Qing Zhen by saying, "Do the changes in the Jing Mountains also have something to do with this research lab?" "No, no, no." Qing Zhen said with a smile, "The changes in the Jing Mountains were beyond our expectations as well. We normally call this place, the Holy Land. Due to the changes in a certain person, there was a change to the entire mountain range. Because we discovered the change in the Jing Mountains too late, we were unable to identify who that person is." Lu Buletin said nervously, "This matter has nothing to do with us." Qing Zhen paused. "I know it has nothing to do with you too. If it did, I would be the nervous one. Then what are you planning to do with us?" However, Qing Zhen did not seem to hear him. He was just waiting for Su Man to bring Ren Xiaosu, Su Xianchu, and Yang Xiaojun to him. At this moment, the troops returned from the forest. It looked like they were carrying something back with them. Qing Zhen smiled and said to Lu Buletin and Luo Xinyu, "Don't get too alarmed later." But a moment later, they were stunned. They saw a multi-layered, reinforced steel cage get carried over. Lying inside of it was a grey person. Lu Buletin suspiciously checked out the person inside the cage. That person was riddled with bullets, but there wasn't much bleeding. It was as though it could control its skin and muscles to close up its wounds the instant the bullet entered its body. This would be pretty unimaginable to the average person because no one could control their bodies like that. In addition, this grey figure was chained up by its arms and legs. The chains had been meant to imprison the person somewhere, but it had somehow managed to break them off. Did the sound that Lu Buletin and the others hear the other night come from this person? At this moment, Lu Buletin remembered the ravaged corpse of Su Xia and the human teeth marks on it. He vomited on the spot at the thought. When Su Xianchuo and the others said that it was a human who bit Su Xia's corpse, he did not believe them. But now, there was no reason not to believe it. Feelings of terror and disgust were gripping Lu Buletin's stomach like they were squeezing everything out of it. He had no food inside him, so he could only vomit out a pale green mixture of gastric juices and bile. Qing Zhen looked at Lu Buletin with great interest. It looks like you also have some understanding of this thing here. Have you seen it chewing on a corpse too? Luo Xinyu's reaction was tougher than Lu Buletin. She forced herself to calm down and asked, just what is this thing? Since it's called an experimental, then of course it's something that's used for performing experiments on. Qing Zhen said, but don't misunderstand, this thing's got nothing to do with our Qing consortium. They are a product from the pre-cataclysm times. We also found out about their existence just recently. It was from before the cataclysm. Luo Xinyu said, rather shocked. How many years has it already been since the cataclysm happened? Can they live for so long? Wait, when you said they, it was at this time that Luo Xinyu realized there wasn't just one of these things around. Qing Zhen carefully sized up the person in the cage. He said, they seem to have just escaped from the research laboratory. Even I'm very curious about how they managed to live until now. This is basically a living specimen. Lu Buletin shivered. This Qing Zhen was treating a living person as a specimen, even if that person was neither human nor demon. Luo Xinyu suddenly realized what the Qing consortium had come to the Jing Mountains for. They had even mobilized a large number of industrial machinery and spared no manpower or logistics, all so they could locate the research laboratory where these freaks were previously imprisoned. When they realized that there wasn't just one of these experimentals around, they finally understood why the combat troops had called for support at first contact with the experimental. It was because they were worried there would be more of them in the area. How many experimentals did you all encounter, and how many people were injured or killed in the capture of this experimental? Qing Zhen asked. Nearby, someone answered, we only encountered this one. We mobilized 5 platoons, and 3 people died while another 13 were injured. Qing Zhen shook his head. It's enough to capture one of these experimentals. For future encounters, it doesn't matter whether they live or die. Just destroy them all. Don't add to the number of casualties on our side. Roger, an officer of the consortium's combat troops answered. The experimental in the cage was clearly not dead yet. Luo Xinyu and Lu Buletin could tell because they could see it was still breathing from the rising and falling of its chest. However, Luo Xinyu was a little skeptical. It should have been years since the cataclysm happened, right? How are they still alive? This was the most puzzling thing. The average human's lifespan was only several decades long, or at most, a little over 100 years. But if these experimentals were really from the time before the cataclysm, how did they manage to survive till now in the underground lab? This didn't make sense. Even if their lifespan could be extended, what did these experimentals eat in the underground lab? Qing Zhen stood before the cage and laughed. Did I not capture them to find out their secret? For example, multicellular organisms like humans use cell division to perform growth and reproduction. Logically, cell division should be an infinite process, since if it could be divided once, then it could be divided again for a second time or more. But what's strange is that human cells can only divide an average of 50 times before they stop dividing one. After that, they will head into an irreversible decline. This is the reason why humans grow old and die. After human cells divide themselves about 50 times, the cells enter a senescence phase. Then the organs start to fail until death occurs. Qing Zhen looked at the person in the cage and continued, I suspect this lab has discovered a way to make the cells divide indefinitely. By doing so, the human body's metabolic rate and lifespan increases. However, they did not consider the consequences of doing something like that. Qing Zhen labeled this creature in the cage as a fiend, but it was neither human nor demon. To him, these fiends had lost their human minds, and their intelligence had degraded to the point of being not that much different from a beast. But in contrast to their intelligence, these fiends had physical strength and agility that surpassed the average humans to the point that not even wild animals were a match. Moreover, wild animals obeyed an order. Just like Ren Xiaosu had said, the different species still had taxonomic orders 1. But these experimentals were different. They did not belong in an order. Right at this moment, the experimental that had been shot 4 or 5 times started coming around. It curled its body and slammed itself against the steel cage, as if it wanted to use brute strength to break the cage apart. However, it seemed that this cage had been specially built by the Qing Consortium. It got slightly deformed but did not break apart from the experimental slamming itself against it. Eventually, the experimental stopped trying. It just glared daggers at Qing Zhen, who was in front of it. Luo Xinyu and Lu Buletin discovered that Qing Zhen remained unusually calm no matter how aggressively the experimental was struggling. There was no point in time that he took a step back due to fear. Qing Zhen removed the magazine from a pistol and threw the pistol into the cage. The experimental bit into the steel pistol and crushed it with its jaws. Qing Zhen and the experimental looked at each other. Suddenly, he said, "Note this down. Subject's teeth have evolved to become harder, its pupils are narrow, and it has a habit of crawling to move around. This thing can no longer be categorized as human, and it's suspected that they are a product of genetic modification. The lab is suspected as a possible secret testing site for the Pyro Company from before the cataclysm." From nearby, someone took out pen and paper to take complete notes on Qing Zhen's observations. Compared to Luo Xinyu and Lu Buletin's startled looks, everyone else looked like they had gotten used to Qing Zhen's calm demeanor. "And, what did this have anything to do with the Pyro Company?" "Shine a bright light at it," said Qing Zhen. Someone shone the spotlight onto the experimental's face. The experimental feared the light so much it instinctively tried to block its eyes with its arms. Qing Zhen wondered, they are clearly afraid of light, so why were they active during the day today? Have they evolved even further, or was it because there was something special that attracted them and made them want to come out even in the light? Someone beside him said calmly, "There are 2 possibilities why they're afraid of the light. One would be that their former human personalities can't face their current selves, and the other would be that their DNA was inserted with animal behavior like nocturnality. This isn't urgent." Qing Zhen nodded and said, "Ask Su Man over the radio whether he's located those 3 people yet. I'm guessing they must have sneaked into our area of operations during the time you all were busy capturing the experimental." Qing Zhen had managed to guess when Ren Xiaosu and the others had sneaked past the perimeter they had locked down. Qing Zhen was very eager to find the trio because he wanted to know if the experimentals had suddenly come out in the daytime because one of the 3 had attracted them. Ren Xiaosu was wandering around a huge shopping mall. Perhaps due to the incredible construction quality of the building, this huge mall did not collapse from earthquakes. But even so, while the facade of the building was still intact, the interior furnishings were damaged beyond recognition. Many of the dropped ceiling tiles had crashed to the floor, and the messy counters below were grey and dusty. The layer of dust that had gathered on them looked like it was at least 10 centimeters thick. The items that could not stand the passage of time had all deteriorated and been damaged. And it was in this shopping mall that Ren Xiaosu finally saw a jewelry shop. The jewelry had oxidized, and the silver ornaments on the counter had all tarnished black. Only by snapping them apart could a trace of its original silvery color be seen in the break lines. As for gold jewelry, they would oxidize as well. The gold in this shopping mall had apparently come in contact for a long time with some iron that was contained in the collapsed dropped ceilings, resulting in red spots forming on the surface. But of course, that wouldn't affect the intrinsic value of the gold itself. He definitely did not want the items made of silver. Silver was not particularly valuable in these times. Ren Xiaosu could only take a limited amount of items with him by himself. He had to go for the items that were the highest in value. It was at this time that the benefit of the storage space was amplified. How much gold could be loaded into a space of 1 cubic meter? Ren Xiaosu had been worried about how he could continue upgrading his storage space. But now there wasn't a need to worry. The gold that was here would probably be enough for him, Yan Liuyuan, and Sister Xiao to live comfortably for many decades to come. Most of the gold in the shopping mall was in the form of jewelry. So to save space, Ren Xiaosu squeezed the gold bracelets and gold necklaces into a clump before storing them in the palace. After all, he could do anything he wanted with his strong hands. But even so, there was still a lot of empty space in the storage area after he had stuffed it full with the gold, which Ren Xiaosu felt was tragic. In the end, he took off his jacket and used it to wrap some of the gold up. Ren Xiaosu even saw diamonds in the shopping mall, but diamonds were no longer considered valuable in these times. Mr. Zhang from the school had once said that a long time ago, diamonds were extremely expensive, even though there was a large quantity of them in the world. It was only priced highly because supply was controlled and prices were inflated. As such, in the current day, no one was advocating owning diamonds anymore. Or perhaps, in times when everyone was more willing to purchase food and not diamonds, the value of diamonds would naturally depreciate. Suddenly, Ren Xiaosu heard the sound of footsteps neatly marching outside the shopping mall. He frowned when he realized the Qing Consortium's people had arrived. Ren Xiaosu knew well that the Qing Consortium would find out about the existence of Su Xianchu, Yang Xiaojun, and him. Since Lu Buletin had been captured, he would surely tell the Qing Consortium about them. At this moment, Ren Xiaosu was in the shopping mall carrying gold inside his jacket as the storage space in his palace was full. He didn't care if Su Xianchu and Yang Xiaojun had achieved their purpose for the expedition. He had everything he needed. Perhaps Su Xianchu and Yang Xiaojun were here to find out about the secret of the supernatural beings and the evolution that was happening in the world, but Ren Xiaosu was not interested in that at all. If there were a reflexology spa still operating in this city, he might be interested in that. Ren Xiaosu was just thinking of making off with the gold he had gotten his hands on. But just as he was about to leave the place, he heard the neat marching of the Qing Consortium's troops as they arrived outside the mall. Ren Xiaosu frowned and stepped back into the jewelry shop. It looked like Lu Buletin had already revealed their existence after getting captured by the Qing Consortium. However, Ren Xiaosu was not panicking yet. This shopping mall was gigantic, so Ren Xiaosu did not think the troops would easily find him even if they came in and searched. Moreover, this ruined city was colossal, and there were a lot of buildings too. Even if the Qing Consortium had thousands of troops, and they were all mobilized to conduct a search of the entire city, it would still take them at least 10 days to a fortnight to sweep through it. The Qing Consortium Su Man was leading the platoons through the dusty streets. They were ready to engage in combat at any time, because based on Lu Buletin's description, Su Xianchu and Yang Xiaojun were both relatively dangerous people. This was especially so for Su Xianchu since he had a danger rating of C. As for someone like Ren Xiaosu, everyone's judgment of him was more or less the same, a typical refugee who had slightly greater than normal strength and knew how to kill people but was otherwise not considered much of a threat. It wasn't because Su Man and Qing Zhen were blindly arrogant, but because Lu Buletin didn't know what Ren Xiaosu's ace in the hole was. Su Man was a professional soldier with an abundance of combat experience. He also understood that if Ren Xiaosu only had greater strength than normal, he wouldn't stand a chance against their firearms. Ren Xiaosu hid behind a dilapidated steel shelf in the shopping mall. He made sure he was completely hidden in the shadows so he would not be discovered by anyone who happened to pass by outside. When he saw a platoon of soldiers being led by Su Man slowly passing by in front of the broken entrance, Ren Xiaosu felt a slight relief. When Su Man led the platoon past the next building's corner, he halted in his tracks. He turned around and said to the soldier behind him, I don't remember some of the things in that building being placed that way. Someone's been here, and he could still be inside. Ren Xiaosu had probably not expected there would be such a fearsome combatant within the ranks of the Qing consortium. He was very detailed about things and had an amazing memory too. Actually, Ren Xiaosu did not really touch the items on the counters facing the outside. At most, he had handled one or two of them. But even so, that did not escape Su Man's eyes. The platoon carefully made their way back, while the other 5 platoons were closing in as well. The wireless communications equipment they had in their helmets was far more convenient than they could imagine. Su Man slowly led the soldiers towards the main entrance as though they had come back after a normal patrol of the area and there was nothing unusual about their movements. Their combat boots were hard-bottomed, so it was impossible for them to stay completely silent while walking on the concrete surfaces. So it was better to pretend they were on a normal patrol. However, when Ren Xiaosu heard these footsteps again, he let out a sigh in his head. He knew that anyone in this world who depended on luck would not live for long. If he were still thinking the other party hadn't discovered him yet, that would be too stupid of him. For the Qing consortium's troops to suddenly return, it didn't matter how unconcerned they were trying to act. Ren Xiaosu immediately understood there must be a reason for it. In that instant, Ren Xiaosu felt his heart ache. He slowly laid down the jacket he had used to wrap up the gold with onto the floor. He decided to abandon it. Now that he had to run for his life, he couldn't risk his life for the gold. Even if he had great strength, carrying a bundle of gold would affect his speed, or worse, his sense of balance. Ren Xiaosu had always treated money as just a tool. He liked it, but he would never indulge in it. It had always been so for him. Not only was he abandoning the gold, Ren Xiaosu was even planning on discarding the jacket. If he slowly took out the gold jewelry from inside the jacket, it would make too much noise. He turned around and ran lightly into the depths of the shopping mall. This mall was huge and spanned several stories as well. The outside of the building was probably surrounded already. Ren Xiaosu wouldn't use his life to test whether anyone standing behind the doors. What if a hail of gunfire swept over him the moment he opened one? That would be the end for him. Therefore, Ren Xiaosu had to run upstairs. From his memory, there was another building next to this shopping mall that was similar in height. This mall had been located in the most prosperous business center of the city, so it wasn't the only building around the area. Ren Xiaosu was not a reckless person. Su Man might pick up that someone was hiding in the mall from his keen observation, but Ren Xiaosu had similarly picked out his getaway route beforehand. The gap between the two buildings was around 20 meters, and Ren Xiaosu was confident that he could leap over based on his current strength and dexterity. Su Man slowly led the troops into the mall. They had their tactical flashlights on as they slowly infiltrated into the darkness within. But not long after entering the building, Su Man noticed the jacket and gold Ren Xiaosu had abandoned on the ground. He said on the communications channel, "We've got confirmation on the target's trail. The target has noticed we're after him and is currently on the run in another direction. Target is extremely cautious." Qing Zhen's voice sounded on the communications channel. "Have you discovered who it is yet?" Su Man hesitated for a moment before saying, "It might be that refugee, Ren Xiaosu. I've not set eyes on the target yet, so I can't confirm." "How did you guess it's Ren Xiaosu without seeing him?" Qing Zhen asked. "Did you find some clues?" Su Man hesitated and said, "We discovered a stash of gold here. I'm guessing only that kid would be so interested in gold." Qing Zhen started laughing. He agreed with Su Man's judgment. Su Xianchuo and Yang Xiaojun were obviously after the secret of the Jing Mountains. The two of them would definitely not be interested in something like gold. At least, it wouldn't be their immediate goal. Who would run this far out here and experience so much danger and terror all for the sake of making off with a bag of gold? If Ren Xiaosu were to hear this, he would be the first to object. Gold was so adorable, so why couldn't he hope to make off with some? Luolan and Lu Buletin had mentioned that Ren Xiaosu was just a refugee, but Qing Zhen did not entirely believe them. He was a suspicious person, so even if everyone said Ren Xiaosu was just a refugee, he would still not underestimate Ren Xiaosu. Ren Xiaosu could have been pretending all this while and might not have been the ordinary refugee they claimed he was. Everyone who appeared here could possibly be here for the secret of the Jing Mountains. They could all have another identity. However, Qing Zhen laughed. He suddenly felt that Ren Xiaosu really might not be interested in the secret of the Jing Mountains. At least to him, gold ranked above the secret of this place. Qing Zhen said, "This Ren Xiaosu is pretty interesting. Capture and bring him to me." Roger. A moment later, the Qing Consortium's troops stormed into the shopping mall like black vipers. Target is escaping to the second floor. Target is escaping to the third floor. Su Man was listening in on the comms to receive updates on the operations. By this time, the troops had discovered Ren Xiaosu's footprints. Inside the building, the floor was covered with layers of dust accumulated over the years, and anyone who stepped on it would leave behind their footprints. It was a good thing to have discovered Ren Xiaosu's whereabouts. But Su Man was considering something. This building had 6 floors, and the total height was probably between 30 and 40 meters. If Ren Xiaosu kept escaping upwards, he might end up having nowhere to go once he reached the top. Was Ren Xiaosu an idiot? Why would he escape up to a dead end? As Su Man led the combat troops up, he recalled the details of his encounter with Ren Xiaosu. When this young man discovered he and the soldiers had returned to this building, he gave up on the gold without any hesitation and even started fleeing as quickly as possible. This person loved money, but he was not greedy. When he realized he was in danger, he did not take any chances and abandoned the gold. Based on the logic of most people, they might bring the gold along with them as they made their escape for a while. They would only make the decision to discard the gold when they realized it was a hindrance to their escape. This was human nature. However, Ren Xiaosu wasn't like this. The way he had abandoned the gold was decisive. Su Man understood this young man he encountered was not simple. The target had a very strong survival instinct, as well as a no-nonsense and sober reasoning process. Besides, even if their target of capture were really an idiot, he would still treat that person as the smartest person around. This was the kind of mindset to approach any combat situation. So since Ren Xiaosu was escaping upstairs, did that mean there was a route of escape up there? This was clearly a separate building by itself, so where could Ren Xiaosu run to? That wasn't right. Su Man suddenly remembered there was a building beside the mall, and it was just over a dozen meters away and slightly shorter than the one they were in. Could Ren Xiaosu escape by jumping over? Su Man did not think of this before because he had believed Ren Xiaosu could not leap across to the nearby building since he himself couldn't do so. The misconception here was that humans tended to judge other people based on their own abilities. If they could not do something, they would think others couldn't do it either. But while Su Man could not do it, that did not mean Ren Xiaosu couldn't do it either. Su Man said loudly in the comms channel, "Outside platoons, go and lock down the adjacent building." A midnight assassination, but what Su Man couldn't understand was, if Ren Xiaosu could really leap across the building, then just what kind of strength and speed did he have? Su Man said to the other soldiers of the platoon he was leading, "You guys keep chasing him upstairs." He then turned around and headed downstairs, running straight for the adjacent building. Su Man firmly believed that Ren Xiaosu wouldn't wait to get caught on the roof. That young man would definitely jump to the next building. Just several moments after he rushed out of the building he was in, he looked up and saw Ren Xiaosu flying overhead. The young man's speed in the air was shockingly fast, and his body was comfortably outstretched to the extreme. Then he lightly landed on the roof of the building across the lane. In that instant, Su Man thought he saw a bird flying. Su Man drew in a deep breath. He ran towards the adjacent building while saying on the comms channel, "Target Ren Xiaosu will need to have his powers reassessed. I repeat, Target's powers will need to be reassessed. This young man was far from what they had imagined him. This was absolutely not a level of strength that their commonly designated F-class threats could reach. Su Man rushed into the building and ran like mad up the stairs to the roof. But everyone who was in this ruined city heard a loud sound come from out of the blue. The sound reverberated through the city and out into the distance, as though a death knell had suddenly sounded. Su Man stood in the dark building and looked around. He was puzzled. What was that sound? It sounded like it came from somewhere nearby. A few moments ago, while Ren Xiaosu was in midair after leaping across to the next building, he saw someone standing atop a fractured skyscraper in the distance before him. He had intended to head to that fractured skyscraper in the first place, so he wasn't really that far from it at this point. A moment later, he landed on the roof and stood there as he looked at the breach of the skyscraper. The broken and twisted rebar made the skyscraper look like it was a demon's tentacles piercing the sky. On top of that fracture, a cap-wearing girl plucked a large sniper rifle out of thin air. Then she placed a foot onto the edge of the crumbled wall and used both her hands to lift the large rifle onto her raised leg for support. Locked and loaded, she took aim. Ren Xiaosu did not know how Yang Xiaojun had conjured the sniper rifle. He looked in the direction Yang Xiaojun was aiming and saw Qingzhen, who was wearing his white suit and standing in the spotlight. Ren Xiaosu was standing in the middle between Yang Xiaojun and Qingzhen, so he could just barely make out the situation at Qingzhen's location. So, Yang Xiaojun wasn't here for anything else. She wasn't here to visit her relatives, nor was she here for the secret of the Jing Mountains. Right from the beginning, her purpose was to kill this young man wearing the white suit. Ren Xiaosu had given it deep thought before and deduced there must have been an organization backing Yang Xiaojun. Moreover, the organization would also have its own intelligence agency. So this could explain why Yang Xiaojun knew about Qingzhen's whereabouts and that he would appear here. Right now in the hinterlands of the Jing Mountains, this cap-wearing girl had finally revealed her intentions and was about to create her greatest assassination attempt. Ren Xiaosu's advanced firearms proficiency made him suddenly think at this moment. He looked in the direction of the suit-wearing young man and considered the many factors affecting a long-distance shot on a target. The distance between Yang Xiaojun and the suit-wearing young man was at the point where the shooter would have to consider compensating for the Earth's rotation. If there wasn't any point of reference, how should the shot be carried out? At this moment, Luo Xinyu, who wasn't far away from the suit-wearing young man, had her head lowered. Her long hair was draped in front of her and blowing in the light breeze. When the wind stopped blowing, Luo Xinyu's hair would also stop moving. Ren Xiaosu realized that the moment was now. At some point in time, Luo Xinyu had freed herself from the shackles on her hands. She pulled out a black dagger from her dense hair and thrust it at the bodyguard beside Qingzhen. But the bodyguard did not back down. Instead, a white light started glowing in his hands as he conjured two fan-like objects and aimed it at Luo Xinyu with killing intent. Beside them, Lu Buletin was dumbfounded with shock. He could never have expected the Luo Xinyu he knew to suddenly become like she was someone else. Where did that delicate and fragile Luo Xinyu go? Was this someone else impersonating her? The dagger Luo Xinyu was holding looked like a work of art. But in her slender hand, the dagger somehow seemed to be imbued with so much power. When the combat troops around them saw this development, they raised their guns and took aim at Luo Xinyu. If Qingzhen's bodyguard could not stand up to her, they would fire their weapons in Luo Xinyu's path to prevent her from assassinating Qingzhen. But Luo Xinyu was not going to kill anyone. She had apparently done this to give Yang Xiaojun an opening. Be it Qingzhen's bodyguard or those troops, none of them were expecting the assassination attempt to come from the top of a far-away skyscraper. Luo Xinyu only feinted an attack before making her retreat. Almost instantly, she stepped back into a shroud of shadow in the building behind her and disappeared. It was as though the door she opened in the shroud of shadow allowed her to cross space-time. It was Luo Xinyu's power. Perhaps even Ren Xiaosu did not expect another supernatural being to be hidden on their team. Furthermore, it was even the person whose acting was the best. This turn of events overwhelmed everyone. But at this time, Qing Zhen spun and looked at the top of the skyscraper. He could feel a sharp pain in his temples. With a pull of the trigger, the muzzle flash from Yang Ziajan's sniper rifle was like a fire-breathing dragon in the dark of night that suddenly brought on the bloodshed. That bodyguard noticed the muzzle flash in his peripheral vision and immediately gave up on chasing after Luo Xinyu to return back to Qing Zhen's side. The duty of a bodyguard was to protect rather than to kill enemies. That bodyguard roared with rage, "Sniper!" The distance between Yang Ziajan and Qing Zhen allowed the bodyguard to react in time. Even though a bullet was fast, it was all relative. With the distance extended, a bullet meant for killing would still have to travel across the dense air of the night sky. The bodyguard threw his own body in front of Qing Zhen to shield him, with those two glowing hand fans made of white light held out in front of his chest. He could have tried to push Qing Zhen aside, but Qing Zhen was just a normal person, so that would have been too slow. Time stilled. A sniper rifle's bullet that was the length of a hand tore through the air of this world. The energy from its rotation distorted the air all around it as it penetrated through the night sky. The spotlight illuminated the area around Qing Zhen like a stage. Meanwhile, that bullet seemingly penetrated through the gaps of the light beams as it arrived on stage after traveling a 1,000 meters. With a loud impact, the rotating bullet slammed into the glowing white fans with great force. The white fans started crumbling apart bit by bit. At one point, the bodyguard even felt like he could see the patterning on the silver hand-length bullet. Right after, the bullet spun through his muscles and heart. It continued to pass through him as it exited the wound with a splatter of blood. This bullet that had traveled over 1,000 meters had the extraordinary capability to pierce through this supernatural being's power and body before it finally fell to the ground. Those two white fans were extremely tough, but they were still unable to stop death. The blood flew through the air and splattered onto Qing Zhen's white suit, staining it red. The spots of blood on the white suit made it look just like plum blossoms that had just bloomed in the winter forest. But even at this moment, Qing Zhen was still looking as calm as ever. It was as though the bullet was not coming for him in the first place. "What a pity," Qing Zhen said and sighed. The people beside him could not tell what he meant. Was he talking about the supernatural being who was his bodyguard who had just died? Or was he referring to his white suit? But actually, even with such simplified data available, it would still be very difficult for people to imagine how powerful a bullet from a sniper rifle was when it hit and passed through someone. Qing Zhen's bodyguard was a supernatural being. But what was very shocking was that at a time when the various organizations were arresting these supernatural beings, Qing Zhen had started using them for his own purposes. At this moment, this silent tiger of the Qing consortium with a notorious reputation even among the other organizations was standing in the limelight as though this were his stage. He bent over to pick up the bullet off the ground and said with a smile, "The saboteurs have finally set their sights on me." The people around Qing Zhen were taken aback. So it was the saboteurs who did this? That obscure legend of a group that was being discussed by the organizations? Qing Zhen turned to look at Lu Buletin. He said with a smile, "As her agent, you didn't even know your client is a supernatural being. You're pretty stupid then. Rest in peace. There is no place for a useless person, in this era." Qing Zhen grabbed Lu Buletin by his hair and stabbed the hand-length bullet into Lu Buletin's eye with his bare hands. Lu Buletin could only let out a short cry of pain before he stopped moving. Both of Qing Zhen's hands were bloody. Right now, Ren Xiaosu was standing atop the roof as he dumbfoundedly watched Yang Ziajan dismount her gun and stand up without any delay. It was as though she already knew it would be very difficult to make another attempt on Qing Zhen's life even if she were to keep shooting at him. A second later, the sniper rifle's muzzle swung over. It was aimed straight at Ren Xiaosu, who was on the roof. Ren Xiaosu sensed a trace of the girl's mischief behind the scope. Ren Xiaosu panicked. "Shouldn't you fucking be taking another shot after failing to complete your mission? Why are you aiming at me?" But Yang Ziajan appeared to be very calm. She had failed, so whatever happened wasn't worth looking back on. The rifle was fired with a cracking sound. But this time, there wasn't anything spectacular about the gunshot. This was because Ren Xiaosu stood there without moving, and the bullet didn't hit him either. As Ren Xiaosu knew all about Yang Xiaojin's firearms proficiency, he knew she hadn't fired this shot to kill him. It was to draw a clear line between them in front of the Qing consortium. If it were really that, then wasn't this done too hastily? Or could it be that she was just doing this out of spite for Luo Xinyu's sake? All of a sudden, Ren Xiaosu saw Luo Xinyu, who had just disappeared, appear on top of the skyscraper. She waved at Ren Xiaosu like she was greeting him before taking Yang Xiaojin's hand and bringing her into the shadow with her. Ren Xiaosu was absolutely stunned by what he had seen this time. He looked at the top of the skyscraper that was now empty, then looked over at the numerous Qing consortium's combat troops coming for him. "You guys are just gonna leave like that? Aren't you gonna bring me along too?" Seeing the large force of the Qing consortium's combat brigade approaching, Ren Xiaosu wanted to cry. "You too may escape with your superpowers after attracting such firepower, but have you considered that you might be inconveniencing for others? What a scam!" Honestly, Ren Xiaosu could never have imagined that Luo Xinyu and Yang Xiaojin were in on it together. Even Yang Xiaojin's assassination attempt on Qing Zhen didn't leave him so surprised. At this time, Ren Xiaosu remembered the first time he met Luo Xinyu and how he had requested to switch Wang Kongyang with someone else for the expedition. Back then, Luo Xinyu had secretly given Yang Xiaojin a look no one but Ren Xiaosu had noticed. Later on, when they were eating fish together, Yang Xiaojin called Luo Xinyu over to have some as well. When someone harassed Luo Xinyu, Yang Xiaojin stood up for her just in time. At the time, Ren Xiaosu had thought Yang Xiaojin was only doing this because they were both women. He never expected these two people already knew each other, and they even put on such a great act in front of everyone. They did not exactly cover all details with their acting, but it was still enough to fool Ren Xiaosu, Su Xianchu, and Lu Bulet, and Luo Xinyu was only a girl. So many soldiers of the private army had died, but Luo Xinyu survived until the very end. This in and of itself should have aroused Ren Xiaosu's suspicions. Before he learned of this outcome, those shreds of evidence were hidden in plain sight, but he didn't pick up on them. But after what happened here, and upon remembering, the details popped into his mind. Ren Xiaosu watched with a pained heart as the dense, dark group of troops neared. He had been too careless. The saying was indeed true, the prettier the animal, the deadlier it was. So this rule was not only true for the wilderness. And these two girls had been keeping Lu Buletin around because he helped to lessen the suspicion on Luo Xinyu. In the end, Luo Xinyu helped Yang Xiaojin determine Qing Zhen's location and even helped her gain an extra moment of time. The only surprise was that they had not expected Qing Zhen to have a supernatural being who would protect him even at the expense of the being's own life. What was so extraordinary about Qing Zhen that a supernatural being would follow him? Right at this time, the rusty iron door on the roof was shattered by someone ramming into it. Ren Xiaosu raised his gun and opened fire in that person's path, blocking his route. He looked around him and let out a curse. Fuck! Not a second later, Su Man arrived through the shattered door onto the rooftop. When he saw Ren sprinting for the side of the roof, he attempted to shoot at him to stop him. In the end, he couldn't match Ren Xiaosu's speed as he tried to take aim at him. In the ruined city, the troops in their black uniforms were making their way towards him like snakes hunting prey. Ren Xiaosu could no longer wait. He had to get out of here before they surrounded him. Back when Ren Xiaosu, Yang Xiaojin, and Su Xianchu penetrated into the city perimeter, he thought he would be the fastest person to get away from here in the event they had to escape. However, that wasn't the case at all. Yang Xiaojin and Luo Xinyu had a trick up their sleeves. Ren Xiaosu leaped off the rooftop. The rooftop on the adjacent building was a drop of several dozen meters from the one he was on. However, Ren Xiaosu was confident he would be fine. Su Man rushed to the edge of the roof in the hope that he could fire another shot at Ren Xiaosu. But by the time he reached the edge, he could only see Ren Xiaosu's receding figure running off into the distance towards the edge of the city. Su Man shouted on the comms channel, "Target is escaping at my 10 o'clock. Shrink the perimeter and lock it down." In the forest outside of the city, the Qing Consortium's perimeter lockdown was still in effect. Over there were countless troops waiting for any signs of unknown danger that approached. But to everyone's surprise, that danger turned out to be a refugee escaping towards them. Before this, almost no one regarded this refugee to be any danger at all. Ren Xiaosu was making a mad dash through the city streets and alleys. Ever since he jumped off the rooftop, he was trying his best not to head for higher ground. This was because he didn't want to end up becoming a live target for the troops. As he ran, he kept thinking about how Su Xianchu didn't seem to have made any moves. It would have been good if there were someone else sharing a load of this firepower at this time. This ruined city was a huge chessboard, and Ren Xiaosu was a small chess piece running around on it. On this chessboard, the other white chess pieces on his team were gone. Meanwhile, those heavily armed black pieces were all looking to hunt him down and kill him. Who dares challenge me? He knew combat troops would for sure be waiting for him up front. The net they had set would slowly open as he arrived. But Ren Xiaosu had no other choice. Only by getting there would he have a chance of survival. But all of a sudden, a violent rumble came from the depths of the Jing Mountains hinterlands. Ren Xiaosu raised his head at the mountains in the distance and saw a fiery light erupting from within the mountain range. Wait a minute, the volcano is about to erupt. Should he keep running forward, or should he turn around? Ren Xiaosu clenched his teeth. At this time, why should he worry about the volcano? Only by staying alive could he consider other matters. Behind him, Su Man also froze for a moment when he saw what was happening at the volcano. Heading within range of the volcano during an eruption was extremely dangerous. Much less going further, they wouldn't even be able to turn around and escape if the volcano really erupted. A lot of people thought that only the living creatures around the main mountain would be affected during a volcanic eruption, but that was only because they underestimated the true power of one. Perhaps the entire area spanning tens to hundreds of kilometers around would go up in a fiery sea. However, Su Man only hesitated for a moment before saying on the comms channel, "Keep advancing." Having fled to the edge of the city, Ren Xiaosu turned around and glanced at the city behind him. The black iron sand-like torrent of Qing Consortium troops was almost reaching him. Without further hesitation, Ren Xiaosu turned and went straight into the forest in the north. As the scattered Qing Consortium troops stationed in the forest started narrowing down the perimeter lockdown, their tactical movements had an unusual sense of depth. Their movements seemed to have been practiced hundreds to thousands of times, with the platoons knowing exactly who would be advancing and who would be providing cover from behind. The platoons in the northern forest had already received orders to round up and capture Ren Xiaosu. Even though the sound of an eruption was currently coming from the volcano behind them, it did not affect them from carrying out their orders. At this moment, Su Man's voice came on through the comms channel. Target's 100-meter sprint time is 3.92 seconds, and he has an unknown strength. All units, kill on sight. Perhaps even Ren Xiaosu could not imagine the kind of technology the Qing Consortium had in their hands. Within the ranks of their troops, there was someone who specialized in evaluating the power and speed of their targets from afar. However, Ren Xiaosu had still not revealed his true strength and capabilities yet, so this didn't allow the troops to fully assess him for now. Qing Zhen had been quite interested in Ren Xiaosu. Moreover, there was also his relationship with Zhang Jinglan to consider, so Qing Zhen was actually thinking of keeping Ren Xiaosu for other purposes. But right now, he did not want to wait anymore. There was only a thin line between capturing him and killing him on sight. The 7 platoons in the forest pulled back their charging handles at almost the same time and pointed their muzzles downwards, ready to raise their rifles and shoot at any moment. In addition, these 7 platoons had switched their communications channel to a different frequency. This was to prevent any outside communications from interfering with their operations. At this moment, these 210 soldiers formed an independent orbit, one that could act first and report later. This had always been the practice of the combat troops under Qing Zhen's command. Qing Zhen's opinion was that if an independent orbit was not even allowed to make their own decisions, then the war machine would not truly have any combat effectiveness. Many people within the Qing consortium ranks had criticized his military command before, but Qing Zhen had never accepted their point of view. He did not accept it in the past, and he would not accept it in the future either. However, what many of the important figures in the Qing consortium did not know was that this form of command made many of the soldiers willing to work for Qing Zhen. He would often make them feel like they were trusted. At this time, Qing Zhen was looking at Lu Buletin, who was lying in a puddle of blood. Some of the troops were carrying out another detailed search on Lu Buletin's corpse. In the end, someone found a folded figure of a tattered doll and said, this was the thing that he was carrying around. Qing Zhen frowned and said, "What the hell is this?" It seemed that not even someone like Qing Zhen had ever seen such a thing before. The troops in the forest were slowly shrinking the perimeter lockdown and had switched on their tactical flashlights. Based on the information Su Man had gathered from Lu Buletin, Ren Xiaosu should have a gun on him. Other than that, he also seized 3 magazines of ammo from the private troops. But the Qing consortium's troops were not afraid of being live targets by switching on their flashlights. After all, Ren Xiaosu, who was alone, definitely could not kill all 30 of them in one fell swoop. If he dared to fire at them, their comrades would instantly open fire at Ren Xiaosu and turn him into Swiss cheese. In the forest, the 7 platoons were gradually moving closer to the city. Meanwhile, Su Man was leading 6 platoons towards the forest in an attempt to corner their target. To catch one person, they had mobilized several hundred soldiers. Ren Xiaosu was getting an unprecedented kind of treatment. However, they still underestimated Ren Xiaosu's capabilities in the wilderness. The reason why Ren Xiaosu had agreed to be the expedition's guide was also due to his self-confidence. Although the Qing consortium's troops were fearsome, they still lacked far too much experience in the wilderness as compared to Ren Xiaosu. When the 6 platoons that Su Man was leading got closer to the 7 platoons coming from the forest, a black shadow suddenly crashed into them. That black shadow was thick as ink, but its movements were demonically fast and nimble. It was as if the trees in the forest were not an obstacle for it at all. The platoons on the northern side did not hesitate and fired straight at it. But the black shadow was prepared for it and simply sidestepped to the right, making the bullets miss. The black shadow did not stop after it sidestepped, and it leaned forward. Taking a stride, it pushed off and rushed into the crowd of the most front-line platoon. What could be done when the enemy had the most powerful firearms and explosives? This was a question Ren Xiaosu had asked Zhang Jinglan before. At that time, Zhang Jinglan said, "You should, of course, run right into their midst, because they won't shoot indiscriminately at you. Their comrades are all around them, while everyone else is an enemy for you." Ren Xiaosu was unsure if Zhang Jinglan's advice was a joke or what, but it seemed like it would work in his current situation. He saw every one of the troops unsheathing their combat knives as a result. As the black shadow was moving too fast, they were indeed worried about friendly fire. But to Ren Xiaosu's shadow clone, these normal human beings were too slow, as well as too weak. The black shadow was completely fearless of being sliced by the knives. It only needed one punch to end a life. Suddenly, the black shadow raised its leg and kicked one of the troops in the chest. That soldier was sent flying 5 meters away just like a kite cut from its line. The other troops were frightened by this. The power in that kick was overwhelming. Su Man, who had arrived just in time, saw a blur of this black shadow from afar. When he finally managed to get a clearer view of it, he was a little puzzled. Weren't they chasing after Ren Xiaosu? Why didn't anyone mention that Ren Xiaosu had such a power? Right at this moment, Ren Xiaosu roared, "Su Xianchu at your service. Who dares challenge me?" He was only afraid that he would reveal his power that could copy other people's powers. Ren Xiaosu only pretended to be Su Xianchu because he knew that Su Xianchu had not been captured yet, while he was sure that the Qing consortium had already found out about Su Xianchu's powers from Lu Bulet, and Ren Xiaosu had already come across several supernatural beings. Yang Xiaojin could pull an unparalleled sniper rifle out of thin air, Su Xianchu could create a shadow clone of himself, Luo Xinyu could travel through the shadows, and Qing Zhen's bodyguard could materialize white fans in his hands. Ren Xiaosu got a false sense that supernatural beings were a dime a dozen. But his superpower was different. A superpower that could copy other people's superpowers. Just how would that be rated? Ren Xiaosu did not know. If the Qing consortium discovered he could copy other people's powers and took an interest in him, who knew what they might do to him? When Ren Xiaosu was escaping, he was wondering about how many supernatural beings existed in this world. Was it a lot? But upon careful consideration, it didn't seem to be so. It was probably the Jing Mountains and Qing Zhen that attracted all of them over here. When Su Xianchu heard Ren Xiaosu's roar, his doubts from earlier were all answered. He immediately updated everyone through the comms channel. The intel earlier was wrong. Target isn't Ren Xiaosu, it's Su Xianchu. In reality, they had determined Ren Xiaosu to be Ren Xiaosu simply because they thought that as a refugee, he would be more interested in the gold. However, there wasn't any direct evidence to prove that his identity was Ren Xiaosu. First of all, they had never seen what Ren Xiaosu looked like. Second, even if they had seen Ren Xiaosu and Su Xianchu before, Ren Xiaosu's face was dirty beyond recognition. Moreover, Ren Xiaosu was wearing Sun Junzhen's uniform, so he was actually dressed in the same outfit as Su Xianchu. According to the intel the Qing consortium had gained, Su Xianchu was known to be able to create a shadow clone of himself to fight in battles. Furthermore, its combat strength was extremely strong, and it could even block bullets. Although this shadow clone of Ren Xiaosu's was black in color and different from Lu Buletin's description, Su Man felt that this could be due to the lighting. Perhaps, this shadow clone would turn grey in the daytime. When the troops of the Qing consortium heard Ren Xiaosu's courageous declaration of Su Xianchu at your service. Who dares challenge me? They thought their target wanted to challenge them to a fight to the death. However, their target turned around and fled. Several shots had brushed past Ren Xiaosu, but he remained unharmed so far. He knew that it wasn't because he could duck well, nor that the Qing consortium's troops were bad at aiming. It was because Yan Liuyuan's wish was taking effect. Ren Xiaosu frowned in worry as he wondered how Liuyuan was doing. He had to quickly get away from the Qing consortium and stop risking things here. Only when he ran out to about 100 meters away did he finally recall his shadow clone. The shadow clone was running rampant in the crowd, and Ren Xiaosu was not even controlling it to aim at the vital points of the enemies anymore. Instead, he made it use its body to ram them into a pulp. Remember, Ren Xiaosu's strength was nearly equivalent to 3 adult men's, and the shadow's attributes were double that. So there wasn't a need to aim for the vital points. Whoever the shadow clone ran into, it would give that person broken bones all over his body. In the perimeter the Qing consortium had set up, the shadow was fighting by itself like a lone sampan. The soldiers felt like it would start waning away at any moment, but the shadow clone surprisingly battled on like it could go on forever no matter how much it got beaten up or how many injuries it received. There were many troops standing between Ren Xiaosu and the shadow clone. When Ren Xiaosu recalled it, the shadow clone smashed into everyone in the crowd like a train on tracks. With the shadow clone recalled, Ren Xiaosu would have to merge with it. Likewise, when Ren Xiaosu wanted it to be released, it would only be able to come out from behind him. When the shadow clone came back to Ren Xiaosu's side, there were a lot of injuries and scars on its body. Ren Xiaosu could feel the injuries it suffered like they were his own, and the pain was unbearable. While the shadow clone was making its escape, it was also shot at by the troops a few times. The pain nearly made Ren Xiaosu cough up blood. Large beads of sweat were rolling down his face and back as Ren Xiaosu endured the pain while continuing to make his escape. It was no wonder Su Xianchu's shadow clone made him look all pale after it shielded him from the bullets. So there was actually a side effect from using the shadow clone as well. But what Ren Xiaosu didn't know was that if Su Xianchu saw this, he would be incredibly surprised. Su Xianchu had tried it out for himself once before. After the shadow clone experienced a high-intensity workout, it would lead to the main body feeling mentally exhausted. When that happened, the main body would experience nausea, vomiting, chest tightness, and the user would feel that they might be better off dying. But Ren Xiaosu's shadow clone was utterly different from his. Ren Xiaosu had once asked the palace whether his mental strength could be assessed. In the end, the answer he got was, unauthorized to answer. Ren Xiaosu continued making his escape in the forest, and the pain brought on by remerging with the shadow clone did not fade away even after a long time. It was at this time that Ren Xiaosu realized he should not use the shadow clone without good reason. If he intended to let the shadow clone take his place in death, then he would have to be prepared for the pain it would bring him. If the shadow clone died once, he would have to die once as well. Ren Xiaosu was violently gasping. He had been injured before, but this pain was much more intense than how a real wound felt. But Ren Xiaosu was comforted in the fact that the shadow clone did not dissipate even after all the injuries, so he still had an ally in battle. The Qing Consortium's troops behind him were like a pack of black hunting dogs that continued hounding him. If Ren Xiaosu were not advancing at a faster speed than them, he would already be in a lot of trouble. Ren Xiaosu did not run in a straight line. Instead, he was trying to slowly shake off the dogs that were chasing after him. Soon, the Qing Consortium's troops began to wonder which direction Ren Xiaosu was. It was only at this point that Ren Xiaosu was able to breathe a sigh of relief. After all, it was way too stressful to be chased by several hundred people. He was prepared to hide in the forest for a while to catch his breath. But it was at this moment that he suddenly heard the rattling of chains up ahead. Ren Xiaosu stopped in his tracks and clutched his chest as he let out a sad laugh. What the fuck, he lamented, dead ends are everywhere in life. Ren Xiaosu had seen the experimental that Qing Zhen had locked up in a cage from afar. However, he did not hear what Qing Zhen had said at that time, so he didn't know there was more than one of these experimentals. Ren Xiaosu thought that the greatest obstacle in his path as he escaped northwards would be the volcano, but how could he have guessed it would turn out to be these experimentals? Based on the source of the sounds, Ren Xiaosu instantly knew that the enemy was coming from 3 directions. In that sense, it meant he had encountered at least 3 of these experimentals. The rattling of chains was getting closer and closer. Ren Xiaosu could once again hear the sound of the experimental's saliva dripping onto the decomposing leaves on the forest floor. The shadow clone stood side by side with him. Ren Xiaosu made a rough estimation in his mind and thought that the shadow clone might be able to take on 2 of those experimentals. However, he did not know whether he could go up against the remaining one all by himself. There were 3 experimentals ahead and several hundred people behind. All of them were looking to do Ren Xiaosu in. Ren Xiaosu did not know whether to laugh or cry. This girl was really not one to accept being on the losing end. She had clearly said that she'd trade the dagger for his food, yet she actually stole it back. Where did the trust between fellow human beings go? How heartless of her! Ren Xiaosu felt that Yang Xiaojin's skill at stealing must also be very high, as no one in town had ever managed to steal Ren Xiaosu's stuff without him knowing. He gave a mental sigh. What should he do now that he didn't have the dagger? What Ren Xiaosu didn't know was it would be very difficult to cut through the skin of these experimentals using an ordinary blade. Even a bullet fired at it would instantly be stopped by the muscles under the surface of their skin. Direct headshots wouldn't work either since the toughest bones in the body are part of the skull. These experimentals had always been unafraid of the threat of bullets, unless they were shot in the eye. However, the speed of these experimentals was far different from Ren Xiaosu's. There was almost a 0% chance that he could hit them in the eye with a shot. His firearms proficiency was only at the advanced stage, not the perfect stage. All of a sudden, Ren Xiaosu felt a brush of wind behind him. He reflexively bent over as a noxious gust of wind went over his head. Once Ren Xiaosu stabilized his footing and looked to see what it was, he was shocked to discover that an experimental had somehow gotten close to him, but there were no chains on this experimental's arms. It had become his mindset that the experimentals would have chains on their arms, and it would be possible to know of their presence once they got close. However, Ren Xiaosu had not expected that not all experimentals would have chains on them. Furthermore, an experimental without chains could even travel in a forest without making a sound. Just this fact alone made it terrifying. When Ren Xiaosu felt around on his back, he frowned. He had still gotten scratched a moment earlier, and there were 5 lines of blood. He started reminiscing about town. Although it was also rather dangerous there, people would only take advantage of you if you showed your weakness to them. But it was different here. Everywhere there were people looking to end you. Ren Xiaosu tried to retreat. But with each step back, those 4 experimentals took 2 steps forward. At some point, Ren Xiaosu realized the appearance of these experimentals here was not a coincidence. They were coming for him. Those 4 experimentals were all crawling on their hands and legs, while the unchained experimental had silently crawled into a tree looking just like a large spider. Ren Xiaosu could not understand something. Just what kind of a place could turn a living human being into something like that? At this moment, a platoon passed by just several hundred meters behind Ren Xiaosu. However, it seemed like they had lost track of Ren Xiaosu's whereabouts. So they were unaware of the situation Ren Xiaosu was in even though they were only a few hundred meters apart. Ren Xiaosu was observing the reactions of these 4 experimentals. When the platoon passed by, the experimentals all stopped in their tracks. It was as though they also didn't wish to be disturbed by the troops during their hunt. Ren Xiaosu got a strange feeling about this, but he didn't have the time to explore it. While the experimentals were distracted by the combat troops, Ren Xiaosu decided to order his shadow clone to attack them. Ren Xiaosu decided he would strike first. He was hoping he could lure these experimentals over to where the Qing Consortium's troops were. However, he was more worried those few hundred people would annihilate all of the living creatures in their line of fire. Compared to the few hundred Qing Consortium troops, Ren Xiaosu was more willing to face these 4 experimentals. When his shadow clone rushed at the 3 experimentals on the ground, the experimental in the tree leaped down at Ren Xiaosu. Ren Xiaosu took a small step backwards. The muscles in his left leg tensed up the moment it landed on the ground, and all of the strength in his body was raging. When the experimental got in front of him, Ren Xiaosu threw his fist out at his opponent and punched as hard as a cannon shot. But he had underestimated the dexterity of the experimentals. His opponent twisted its body in midair and forcibly avoided Ren Xiaosu's punch. It even managed to stretch its hand out and grab hold of Ren Xiaosu's arm. Ren Xiaosu was startled before pulling back his punch and taking another small step backwards. At the same time, he raised his leg and kicked the experimental several meters away. The experimental laid on the ground and twitched a little before getting on its feet again to jump at Ren Xiaosu. All of a sudden, Ren Xiaosu felt a burst of pain throughout his body. The tearing feeling going through his bones made him break out into a sweat as his muscles started trembling. He saw his shadow clone tussling with the 3 experimentals as they ripped and snatched at the crouched shadow clone's body. One of the experimentals was even biting on the shadow clone's waist. The shadow clone had enough strength to lift up an experimental with a single hand. It picked one of them up and slammed it ruthlessly onto the ground. However, this experimental was even hardier than Ren Xiaosu imagined. It didn't even look like it was hurt after being slammed like that. This was the disadvantage of not having a weapon. Ren Xiaosu couldn't kill off these experimentals, so it would be difficult to say who might end up dying. Ren Xiaosu wanted to get home, even if the path back was filled with blood and thorns. Because there were no sharp objects to kill the experimentals with, the shadow clone's strength eventually ebbed away due to the fact that it was facing the three terrifying monsters of the experimentals at once. These monsters were biting onto the shadow clone and not letting go. Ren Xiaosu felt like every bite was bitten on his own body. The unbearable pain was being transmitted to his central nervous system from various parts of his body and was generating a complex array of signals that ran wild through his neural network. This in turn affected the normal function of his willpower. Raising his hand became slow, and his hands were trembling as well. The experimental in front of him had many of its attacks blocked by Ren Xiaosu, but it gradually realized its enemy's actions were starting to slow down and become weaker. Ren Xiaosu's eyes had reddened. He endured the severe pain and was nearly in tears. In all his years, Ren Xiaosu had never cried before. He never even shed a single tear. He grabbed a tree branch next to him for support and caught his breath. Everyone here was hell-bent on killing him. The experimentals wanted him dead. The Qing Consortium also wanted him dead. But importantly, he didn't want to die. The shadow clone was not omnipotent. Or perhaps, no superpowers in this world were omnipotent. Ren Xiaosu needed a weapon, even if his gratitude tokens only stood at 93. He said to the palace, "Give me the weapon." The voice from the palace said calmly, "You have 93 gratitude tokens at the moment. Unauthorized to unlock the weapon." "Hey! I said give me the weapon." Ren Xiaosu's voice sounded like it was sinking into the ocean. "I'm telling you now that I'm dying, so give me the weapon." At this moment, time seemed to have frozen. Ren Xiaosu saw the experimental that was leaping at him slow down, moving so slow that it looked like it was stationary. The voice from the palace finally said, detecting the smell of death. "Do you want to activate the seal?" Ren Xiaosu said in confusion, "Activate what seal?" "Unknown." "Then what is the price for activating this seal?" "Loss." "Lose what?" Ren Xiaosu said in surprise, "You have to at least tell me what I'll lose, right? Only then can I decide whether I want to activate the seal or not." "Everything." Ren Xiaosu suddenly sneered at the palace. "How much blood have I bled in the wilderness in all my years of survival? How many tree roots and wild vegetables have I eaten? Yet you're telling me now that I will have to lose everything? Why do I have to listen to you? Based on what? And besides, do you know what everything represents? Gold, money, the gun I have, Yan Liu Yuan, Sister Xiaoyu, and even these clothes I'm wearing. You're just a lousy palace. Why would you need my clothes?" The palace did not speak anymore. Ren Xiaosu felt a little awkward. Shouldn't it at least haggle? Ren Xiaosu looked at the forest in the night, then looked at that intent to kill that was getting ever closer. The frozen time was gradually beginning to thaw while the speed of the experimental that was leaping at him was becoming faster. That experimental opened its mouth to reveal a set of vicious teeth as it tried to devour Ren Xiaosu's organs and even suck all of his blood and marrow dry. Am I really on the verge of death? Ren Xiaosu thought as he stared at it. But he still hadn't lived yet. The next moment, a wan smile appeared on Ren Xiaosu's face. "Isn't it just 7 thanks?" He said calmly in his mind, "I want to thank myself 7 times. First, I want to thank myself for never shying away from an opportunity. Second, I want to thank myself for not being afraid when facing danger. Third, I want to thank myself for not compromising in the face of adversity. Fourth, I want to thank myself for being principled in the face of temptation." Ren Xiaosu's mental voice was getting louder and louder, to the point of being thunderous as it shook the entire palace. Fifth, I want to thank myself for never being hypocritical. In that instant, Ren Xiaosu heard his own heartbeat beating loud as a drum. Sixth, I want to thank myself for always staying clear-headed and never hesitating. He heard the sound of the wind again as it brushed against his skin. The researchers in the city who were inside the research lab suddenly raised their heads. They detected a huge energy surge in the north that felt like the rising sun. Ren Xiaosu said calmly and determinedly, "Seventh, I want to thank myself for always keeping my head up and taking on whatever the quagmire of life throws at me." The voice from the palace stayed silent for a moment before saying, "Gratitude received from Ren Xiaosu, +7. You've received rights to unlock the weapon. Confirm unlock." "Unlock!" Ren Xiaosu roared. Suddenly, it was as though the lock-on time melted away. Ren Xiaosu watched quietly as the experimental before him came leaping at him. He stuck out his hand and grabbed at nothing, as though he had gained some sort of inexplicable power. The next moment, a black saber appeared in Ren Xiaosu's hand. In that instant, Ren Xiaosu grit his teeth and swung it horizontally with all his power. The muscles in his body were pumping hard to the extreme, and the veins on his forehead were pulsating non-stop. With a slash, the tearing sound of leather and skin reverberated through the forest. That originally ferocious experimental was split in two by the black saber. Ren Xiaosu was enraged. Life and death, that was basically the essence of everything in this world. The look in the experimental's eyes was one of confusion. It seemed like it couldn't understand where the saber in Ren Xiaosu's hand had come from, nor could it understand why one slash was all it took to end it. Pale yellow blood trailed down the black saber and dripped onto the ground of decomposing leaves. Ren Xiaosu held the saber up and looked at the battlefield. For some reason, when Ren Xiaosu held this saber that had appeared out of thin air in his hands, another saber also appeared in his shadow clone's hand. That black saber and his black shadow clone seemed to merge perfectly into one entity. The second the shadow clone's saber appeared, the three experimentals engaging it wanted to give up attacking. But it was already too late for them. The shadow clone swung its saber down and split the experimental in front of it in half. It did not stop, taking a quick step forward and holding down another experimental by its neck. That experimental was being pressed ruthlessly against the ground and could not move. The experimentals had great strength, but when one was held down by the shadow clone, it was as though it was a helpless beast on the verge of death. The shadow clone chopped off the experimental's head. The last remaining experimental escaped into the forest, but Ren Xiaosu knew it wouldn't get all that far. Ren Xiaosu stood in place and stared into the darkness of the night before him. The pain he had suffered earlier was still stimulating his nerves, but this was the first time he experienced the joy of the battle. So this was what it meant to be a supernatural being. At this moment, the voice from the palace said, "Side quest number 2 has been activated, collect 1000 gratitude tokens to unlock the intermediate form of the weapon." When someone heard the sound of the fighting, the first thing they did was to send a command over the communications channel for everyone to gather. Like black iron sand that was attracted to a magnet, the Su-man-led Qing Consortium combat troops quickly moved towards the point of the incident. But they were disappointed the target was already gone by the time they arrived at the scene of the battle. Let alone mistaking Su Xianchu as Ren Xiaosu at the beginning, they had even lost track of Su Xianchu now. This made Su-man feel extremely depressed. It had been some years, but this was the first time Su-man had encountered this many unexpected things while carrying out his mission. Su-man advanced forward with great difficulty inside the forest. They trampled on the decomposing leaves and twigs, making a lot of noise. Su-man pulled down his protective goggles and took a look around, then suddenly gasped. He saw the corpses of several experimentals up ahead that had been dismembered by some sharp object. The pale yellow blood of these experimentals splattered on the ground was actually not obvious, but the broken bodies shocked everyone a lot. Su-man said, "Gather the body parts and put them together to see how many experimentals fought in the battle." Based on Su-man's guess, Su Xianchu must have encountered these experimentals soon after his retreat. After that, the battle occurred. By this time, the troops had picked up the pieces of the experimentals' corpses and put them together. 4 experimentals. Someone said, "One of the experimentals' arms couldn't be found, but it should be around here somewhere. There's only a single set of shoe prints here." The experimentals were naked, so we suspect the number of humans who participated in the battle should be just Su Xianchu, someone analyzed. Su Man nodded. He spoke on the open comms channel, "Boss, we might have to re-evaluate Su Xianchu's power. He killed off 4 experimentals by himself." Su Man looked at the ground at a leaf and continued, "But Su Xianchu is also hurt. There are traces of his blood here." Qing Zhen stood outside of the spotlight's focus. The place was bright as day, and he thought for a long time before saying, "Being able to take on 4 experimentals and kill them all is really quite shocking. Upgrade Su Xianchu's danger rating to be. Remember to bring back a sample of Su Xianchu's blood to place it into the records." Roger. Su Man arranged for the people around him to get samples of the blood for safekeeping from the leaf on the ground. In this era, the DNA contained in blood was extremely vital. Qing Zhen had folded his hands behind his back. He stood in place and wondered, Su Xianchu and Yang Xiaojun have both appeared. Luo Xinyu has also revealed herself to be part of the saboteurs syndicate. But what about Ren Xiaosu? Has any one of you seen Ren Xiaosu? They did not know Ren Xiaosu had successfully made Su Xianchu the scapegoat. The supernatural being they recognized to be a B-class threat was actually Ren Xiaosu. What was the concept of being a B-class threat? All of the supernatural beings who had been marked as a B-class threat were considered extremely dangerous people. Su Man answered on the comms channel, "We didn't see Ren Xiaosu. It might be possible that he didn't even come into the perimeter we set up." "That could be possible." Qing Zhen nodded. If they were to go back to their initial assessment of the targets, Ren Xiaosu would just be an unimportant F-class threat. In that case, it would be quite normal that he had chosen to retreat after finding the perimeter the Qing Consortium had set up. Lu Buletin had also mentioned that Ren Xiaosu had always insisted on avoiding the Qing Consortium. Qing Zhen smiled. If only they had caught Ren Xiaosu, that would have been great. He might have become a bargaining chip they could use against Zhang Jinglin in the future. It was a well-known fact throughout the entire northern frontier that Zhang Jinglin placed a lot of importance on friendship. But it wasn't a big deal even though they hadn't caught him. Be it Stronghold 112 or Stronghold 113, they were both controlled by the Qing Consortium. Once Ren Xiaosu got back, their Qing Consortium would still be able to get their hands on him at any time. Su Man looked up ahead in the forest. Ren Xiaosu's footprints showed that he was heading straight in the direction of the volcano. It seemed that he had already escaped north. He did not keep pursuing. From the looks of the bloodstains at the battle site, Su Xianchu must have not been badly hurt. Even if they continued after him, it would be too late. However, Su Man was rather shocked by this. During the day when so many of the troops took on just 1 experimental, 3 of their soldiers had died while another 13 were injured. But now, there was someone who could kill 4 experimentals single-handedly. Moreover, the wounds on these experimentals were all very similar. They had tested it out before and found that even an extremely sharp combat knife would have to be wielded with great strength to tear through the skin of the experimentals. The secret of this Su Xianchu ran far deeper than anyone could imagine. Su Man had already decided to hold the upper management of Stronghold 113's private army accountable for this matter. How could they not know there was such a terrifying supernatural being in their own ranks? At this time, Su Xianchu was still in the dark about the consequences he would be facing. Unlike Ren Xiaosu and Yang Xiaojun, he was actually the one who didn't break into the perimeter of Qing Consortium's operations. Su Xianchu did want to find out about what was happening in the Jing Mountains. But after not managing to break into the perimeter at the beginning, he thought about how he might not be able to get out once he got in. In the end, he decided to just go around the perimeter and head towards Stronghold 112. He had his shadow clone carry him the entire way as he hurried to his destination. By the time Ren Xiaosu retrieved the gold, Su Xianchu had already gone around the city and arrived at the rear of the Qing Consortium. So Su Xianchu knew nothing of what was happening in the city. He also did not know he had been put on the Qing Consortium's threat list, nor that he was really high up on it as well. If he knew about this, he might just have turned back to fight Ren Xiaosu to the death. Su Xianchu, who was being carried by his shadow clone, had a niggling feeling that something was wrong, but he didn't know what it was. "Let's fall back," Su Man said, "set up the defensive line. It's almost time for the experimentals to start getting active. We still don't know where their hideout is." Su Man seemed to understand that even with these 4 experimentals dead, that did not signify it was the end of them. The number of experimentals was far more than anyone could imagine. But right at this moment, Su Man suddenly heard the sound of rapid footsteps from some hundreds of meters up ahead. It sounded like someone was running in a great hurry. He flicked the beam of his tactical flashlight over and was surprised to see Ren Xiaosu being piggybacked on his shadow clone and fleeing. Su Xianchu was stunned. What was with this? Why was this Su Xianchu running back here? Didn't he already escape? When Ren Xiaosu saw Su Man and the soldiers from afar, he started deviating from his original path. He had intended to go around on the left side of the platoons to bypass the Qing Consortium soldiers. But Su Man did not hesitate. He immediately pulled the charging handle of his gun back and prepared to shoot. But when Ren Xiaosu heard the sound of guns being cocked, he immediately said, "Why the hell are you shooting at me? Look at what's behind me." Su Man suspiciously looked at what was behind Ren Xiaosu. He saw dark shadows moving in the forest as he heard the loud dissonance of chains being dragged around. Su Man immediately knew that this was bad. "Did you fucking go and poke the experimental's nest?" For someone like Su Man who could grasp the situation, he knew immediately that Su Xianchu had accidentally walked into the current hideout of the experimentals. That was why he attracted all of them. Those who didn't would fucking think that Ren Xiaosu had called for backup and come back to seek revenge. But because of this, Su Man could confirm Su Xianchu's identity even further. After all, as Lu Buletin had said, Su Xianchu once used his shadow clone to carry himself as they walked. It was just that easy and relaxing. Honestly speaking, Ren Xiaosu himself also had not expected that Lu Buletin would somehow end up helping him to conceal his identity and even end up selflessly paying the price with his life. Those experimentals were chasing after Ren Xiaosu in a frenzy. Their saliva was flying all over the place as they scampered across the ground. When Su Man saw this, the first thing he did was to call out on the comms channel, "Attention, everyone in the vicinity of the city, set up a defensive line." There were a lot of Qing Consortium troops in the forest, with up to several hundred of them. But it seemed like there were even more experimentals than them. But at this time, Su Man had notified those in the city to set up a defensive line instead of issuing the command for those who were here to evacuate. Su Man said on the comms channel, "All units on site, stay in your assigned positions as per your platoon orders to defend and fire. We have to buy some time for those who are still in the urban area." As Ren Xiaosu ran like mad, he watched the Qing Consortium troops stop in their tracks and kneel down to adopt a shooting stance. Without any other defensive fortifications, they started using their own bodies as shields. Ren Xiaosu's speed while his shadow clone piggybacked him was much faster than the experimentals could travel. Thus, he was able to successfully veer off his initial trajectory when the Qing Consortium troops opened fire and avoided being caught in their line of fire. However, Ren Xiaosu felt rather shocked at heart. So this was the difference between an organization's combat troops and soldiers from a private army? The combat troops of an organization would actually sacrifice their own lives and safety in order to gain more time for their brothers in arms. What was it about that suit-wearing young man that he could lead a force like that? In reality, Ren Xiaosu had thought too highly of an organization's combat troops, or rather, the soldiers under Qing Zhen's command had given Ren Xiaosu a false impression that soldiers belonging to an organization were very united and fearsome. The truth was, these soldiers serving under Qing Zhen were in fact also considered the best of the best within all of the organization's militaries. Su Man was a very combat-oriented warrior, but that didn't mean that he was unafraid of dying. One of the most important qualities in combat was an understanding of the overall situation so that a correct decision could be made. He understood this. If he stayed to buy time for those in the city, he would very likely end up dead. But if he were to retreat, his comrades in the city would not have enough time to prepare for the situation and even more people would die as a result. Qing Zhen had already ordered the troops to fortify the defenses, such as building simple bunkers and enclosures that were all necessary. But Su Man knew well that they had incorrectly estimated the number of experimentals here in the Jing Mountains. According to their information, there should only be about 100 or so experimentals here. The records of the Pyro Company's research laboratory only showed 87 living specimens back then. Could it be that the Pyro Company had purposely leaked this false information to lure the Qing Consortium into a trap after they were unable to get ahead of them to restart this research lab? Importantly, Qing Zhen had killed many of the Pyro Company's people over the past 2 years. Of course, Qing Zhen was not a fool either. He had brought several times more people out here than was originally planned. Qing Zhen wasn't going to die in such a place. What Su Man was worried about was not Qing Zhen's safety, but the heavy losses that Stronghold 112's combat brigade might suffer. At the moment, Su Man's open communications channel was live. As such, he could hear Qing Zhen's calm voice speaking in his helmet, "Go and save them, then slowly retreat to the edge of the city." I was prepared for this. Su Man heaved a sigh of relief. He said on the tactical communications channel, "Hold the line. Reinforcements will be here soon." If they could defend long enough, they wouldn't die. Or at least, most of them wouldn't. If it had been another big shot of the organization, their first response would probably be to abandon the lone fighting force out here. Ren Xiaosu took advantage of the chaos to bypass the perimeter the Qing Consortium's troops were defending, and his shadow clone made a mad dash south. Ren Xiaosu had initially thought that it would be safer for him to go north, but who could have guessed that it would be even more dangerous? When the Qing Consortium came into the Jing Mountains, they had deliberately avoided the volcanic area because the poisonous gases there could not be warded off. So this volcanic area became the only place where the Qing Consortium had not conducted a sweep. Who would have thought that those experimentals were hiding in the vicinity of the volcanoes? However, these experimentals were not lured out by Ren Xiaosu. He had only encountered them along the way while he was heading north. These several hundred experimentals were clearly looking to attack all humans who were in the Jing Mountains at this time. Ren Xiaosu did not know what attracted them out, or if they were awoken when they realized the volcanoes were about to erupt. Ren Xiaosu didn't care. Even if he had to face the face bugs or the wolf pack, it was still a better option than facing the Qing Consortium or the experimentals. He could handle 4 of them, but taking on several hundred experimentals was way out of his league. If he didn't have his shadow clone to carry him as he made his escape, Ren Xiaosu might have laid down on the ground and pretended that he was an experimental too. These experimentals might just fall for it since their intelligence had lowered to such a point. Ren Xiaosu wondered why there were so many of these experimentals. It was quite obvious that Su Man did not expect there to be so many of them either, so could it be that they had been breeding all these years? Were those experimentals unchained at their limbs the ones born later? Ren Xiaosu wasn't being overly imaginative. He just didn't understand why. These experimentals didn't have many recreational activities to do deep in the mountains and forests anyway, so other than reproducing, what else could they do? After he killed those 4 experimentals, Ren Xiaosu felt like he couldn't be more invincible. But just half an hour later, that sense of superiority was crushed by reality. Ren Xiaosu, I am invincible. Reality, no, you're not. The rest of the Qing Consortium's troops headed north to save Su Man and his men. Meanwhile, Ren Xiaosu made use of this gap to escape south, which would bring him back on his original route to Stronghold 113. Yang Xiaojin's and Luo Xinyu's whereabouts were unknown, while Su Xianchu was leisurely taking another route as he left the Jing Mountains. This adventure had ended up more like a farce. However, it did reveal the true nature of the world to Ren Xiaosu. He only knew about the Pyro Company and Qing Consortium for now, but there were many more organizations and strongholds out there. This world was much bigger than he had thought it to be. While Ren Xiaosu was making his escape, he suddenly heard another loud rumble from the volcano behind him. This time, the ground even started shaking. He saw the volcano erupting as lava spewed out of the crater into the air. Clumps of magma cooled rapidly after reacting with the cold air and solidified into hot rocks. Shortly after, a hail of meteorite showers started pouring down, and the forest turned into a sea of fire. The built-up pressure in the volcano finally erupted. Qing Zhen watched the sights from the ruined city and said with a sigh, "What a pity." No one knew what he was feeling pity for this time. Someone beside Qing Zhen asked, "Boss, what do we do now?" But just as the question was asked, an earth-shaking roar of a creature came from the crater of the volcano. The sound of that roar seemed to travel dozens of kilometers in an instant. Ren Xiaosu looked back in surprise. At the peak of the volcano, he suddenly saw a huge claw grabbing onto the edge of the volcano's crater. It looked like it was something trying to climb out. There was actually a creature hidden inside that volcano? What kind of creature could possibly live in magma? Something that terrifying had even appeared now? Then what kind of terrifying existence could that creature he had encountered at the river but not seen with his own eyes be? Qing Zhen sighed and said, "Such a thing actually exists? Let's temporarily pull out of the Jing Mountains from the west. The mission is a failure." Qing Zhen's trusted aide who was standing next to him said in shock, "Just what the hell is that?" "Yan Tao, call that useless brother of mine," Qing Zhen said as he kept his gaze on the volcano. "If that thing crawls out, or a large number of experimentals get forced south because of the eruption, Stronghold 113 will be in danger." The trusted aide whose name was Yan Tao wondered if Qing Zhen really thought the stronghold would fall. He instinctively went to retrieve the satellite phone but discovered that the usually working satellite phone couldn't make any calls. The heatwave caused by the volcanic eruption began to sweep through the entire mountain range. Keep in mind that there wasn't only one volcano in the Jing Mountains. Seeing this, Qing Zhen said, "Let's leave this place first." This sea of fire looked like it was about to bury the secret of the Jing Mountains. Su Man and the others who received their orders to retreat continued firing in an orderly manner as they did so. They did not start panicking because of the volcanic eruption. Caught in this dangerous situation, they became even calmer. When they finally came out of the forest and arrived at the edge of the city, someone who was with Qing Zhen triggered a remote in their hand. In an instant, a line of fire was lit as the dividing line between the city and the forest started burning. The explosives the Qing Consortium had buried here beforehand were detonated all at once and completely contained the experimentals to the north of the forest. Even for creatures as strong and tough as the experimentals, half of them were still killed or wounded by the explosives detonating. As for the remaining wave of experimentals that had not been affected by the explosion, they could only watch from behind the wall of fire as the Qing Consortium's personnel made their retreat. The experimentals did not linger here for long. Instead, they went back into the forest, seemingly to look for another route to bypass this area. Panting, Su Xianchu returned and came up to Qing Zhen. He lowered his head and said, "Sorry, I didn't manage to bring Su Xianchu back." "It's okay." Qing Zhen shook his head. "Get in the car, we'll head west. There should be another route there that can bring us back to Stronghold 112. Qing Zhen then turned around and left. The sound of his leather shoes tapping on the ground gave an aura of calm to his footsteps. A large convoy of military transport trucks and off-road vehicles, as well as many other heavy machines, were parked at the edge of the city. Su Man did not move. Qing Zhen turned around and looked at him. "You want to ask me why I got our people to save you? Don't feel too touched by that. It's just business between us. I only got our people to save you because I still have use for you." Su Man stammered as though he was going to say something. In the end, Qing Zhen laughed and said, "Save your words of loyalty. I've never believed in that. But at this time, a soldier up ahead shouted, "This is bad. Our vehicles can't be driven anymore. Come over and take a look at what's happened to the tires." Su Man was startled. What happened? Are the tires punctured? We brought along tire jacks and machinery to patch up tires and fill them with air. The soldier said with a bitter expression, "It's not a puncture. Our vehicle's tires have been slashed." Su Man and Qing Zhen were confused. The smile on the previously calm Qing Zhen stiffened. "Su Xianchu, this is the first time I've been so keen on killing someone. Su Man, bring me my uniform." Qing Zhen and Su Man knew that Su Xianchu had escaped south, but they really hadn't expected something like this to happen. In Su Man's opinion, it should have been enough to just puncture the tires. But rather than that, their opponent had chosen to slash the tires. By slashing the tires, it would mean that everyone from the Qing consortium would have to leave the Jing Mountains on foot. It wasn't really that dangerous, but it would definitely make them look pathetic, especially if they were wearing a white suit. Su Man whispered in a soft voice behind Qing Zhen, "This mission failure might make the consortium punish you." Qing Zhen did not mind that. "It's fine, those old fogies will still need someone to do their work for them. I'll just treat it as taking a vacation for some time." "How are we going to handle that Ren Xiaosu?" Su Man asked. "If he doesn't die in the Jing Mountains, he'll definitely find a way to get back to Stronghold 113. Qing Zhen thought for a moment before saying, "When the satellite phone works again, tell Luolan to keep a watch out for now. As for how to handle him, I still haven't thought of it yet. Also, get him to quickly send Zhang Jinglan away. That person must not die under our watch. It's quite possible that someone has already been sent out to assassinate him." Ren Xiaosu was indeed the person who slashed the tires of the Qing Consortium's vehicles. At that time, the Qing Consortium's people were still busy fighting the experimentals, so he decided he might as well do it. Besides, Ren Xiaosu had been running from the Qing Consortium's pursuit for some time, so he couldn't vent his anger if he didn't get his revenge. The volcano behind him was still erupting. The moon in the sky was already covered by the plumes of ash and smoke in the air. Moreover, the volcano's eruption seemed like it was getting more and more violent. Ren Xiaosu was a little puzzled. What was that roaring creature in the volcano's crater? Even at the end, he did not see it fully emerge out of the crater. As he left the city, he watched the Qing Consortium detonate explosives at the edge of the city. Ren Xiaosu once again witnessed how terrifying explosive weapons were in the possession of humans. Ren Xiaosu kept heading back south via the original route he had taken here. He suspected there could still be a few sporadic experimentals along the way, just not as many as the entire nest he had stumbled upon. In fact, Ren Xiaosu was no longer as scared. With his shadow clone's super strength and dexterity wielding the black saber, his destructive power was incalculable. With the two skills stacked, it became a much more powerful combination. Somehow, this seemed like the path forward for Ren Xiaosu. However, this path might be littered with many more twists and bends. On the way back to Stronghold 113, it wasn't the experimentals that would be the most dangerous to encounter, but those face bugs and the wolf pack. Ren Xiaosu recharged himself while being carried on his shadow clone's back. Meanwhile, the shadow clone was going so fast that it felt like it was floating in the air. It even looked like its legs were casting an afterimage behind it as it ran. Although this made Ren Xiaosu look like he was disabled and needed to depend on someone to carry him, he did not care. In between, he even went back to the cave they had spent a night in. There, he discovered that a line of elegantly written words had appeared at the top of the cave, "It's right behind you." These words were not here before, and they looked like they were still fresh in the rock. In Ren Xiaosu's memory, he remembered that Yang Xiaojun had fallen behind on the day they set off from here. For some reason, he suddenly felt that this line of elegant writing must have been made by Yang Xiaojun to scare people for fun. How mischievous, eh? Ren Xiaosu continued on his way back south after having a look here. An hour later, the forest fire caused by the volcanic eruption spread southwards. The entire Jing mountain range had become a sea of fire. Ren Xiaosu could vaguely hear the sound of wild animals running behind him. It sounded like they were escaping to the canyon. However, this didn't really bother Ren Xiaosu. It had taken them a long time to get here, but it felt much faster when he was going back. It only took half a day before Ren Xiaosu reached the canyon again. He looked into the canyon and that shimmer of light above the towering cliff walls. Ren Xiaosu did not hesitate any further. As long as he was fast enough, the face bugs, wolf pack, or even loneliness could not catch him to him. The shadow clone carrying Ren Xiaosu ran through the canyon like a gust of wind. The face bugs atop the towering cliff walls sensed the aura of a human and swarmed out. But as soon as they came out, Ren Xiaosu had already made it out of the canyon. The face bugs were left silent on the cliff for a long while. All of them were communicating with their feelers with one another. Did a person pass by here just now? The fuck can that be a person? The moment he passed through the canyon, dawn broke. In the sky, golden rays of light penetrated through the cloud cover. When Ren Xiaosu saw this sight, he felt a little more spirited. He had gained a lot in his trip to the Jing Mountains this time, even though he didn't stay for long. But when he got back to the canyon again, it suddenly felt like it had been a long time since he was here. It felt like a century had passed. He wondered how Yan Liuyuan and Sister Xiao were doing at home. Ren Xiaosu was really anxious to return home. Ren Xiaosu could dimly sense some movements coming from the forest. He was startled before realizing that the wolf pack had stayed around the entrance of the canyon all this while, as though they were waiting for him to come back. Soon after, the slowly approaching wolves watched as Ren Xiaosu, who was laying on his shadow clone's back, ran through the gaps in their pack. They didn't even have time to react. The wolf pack stopped in their tracks and quietly watched Ren Xiaosu's receding figure as he left. He was even faster than they were. The Wolf King also fell silent. Had they been waiting here for nothing all these days? When Yan Liuyuan opened his eyes under the blanket, he refused to get out of bed. Xiao was folding clothes and saying, "It's time to get up, Liuyuan. I don't wanna. Let me sleep for a while more." Yan Liuyuan murmured. Xiao laughed and said, "If you get up 15 minutes earlier each day, you'd have gained an additional 90 hours a year that you could use to do something you like doing. Think about it, what do you like doing the most?" Yan Liuyuan pondered for a long time before saying with uncertainty, "I like sleeping the most." "Get up already." Xiao frowned and said, "You're even more annoying than your brother." Xiao lifted Yan Liuyuan's blanket. The warm air inside escaped all at once, and Yan Liuyuan unwillingly got out of bed. It was winter now, and the winter temperatures in this era were extremely cold. In Yan Liuyuan's memory, there would always be people freezing to death in the streets or in their shacks during winter each year. The shacks were only built out of tree branches or metal frames, while the four walls were wrapped with broken rags and cloth. This construct was completely unable to shield anyone on the inside from the wind. During those years, he and Ren Xiaosu were always shivering in their shacks from the cold. Ren Xiaosu even took all of their summer and winter clothing out to wrap it around Yan Liuyuan. But even so, it was still very cold. But whenever he thought of those times, Yan Liuyuan would always feel overjoyed. He recalled what Ren Xiaosu said to him at that time, "The happiness of humans does not stem from enjoyment but the suffering we go through." When you're going through the worst moments of suffering and taste sweetness, you would desperately want to keep living no matter what. That sweet taste of things might not be much to other people, but it is the greatest happiness that you know at that moment. Sometimes, Yan Liuyuan felt that if Ren Xiaosu were born inside the stronghold, he would probably be a philosopher like Mr. Zhang had described in class before. Wang Fugui walked in with 2 sweet potatoes and greeted them. "Xiao, I brought one for each of you. Eat them while they're hot." "Uncle Fugui," Yan Liuyuan took the sweet potato from him and asked, why do you like eating sweet potatoes so much? You roast them every day. Wang Fugui said with a wide smile, when I was still a child in the town outside of Stronghold 107, there was a famine, so my father and I escaped all the way here to seek help from our relatives. Back then, it still wasn't so dangerous on the outside. Once, we dug up 2 sweet potatoes in the wilderness and my father roasted them for me to eat. At that time, I felt that sweet potatoes were the most delicious thing in the world. Ever since Wang Fugui came running over to the school wearing his jacket and trying to bribe Wang Kongyang over the gun firing at midnight, the way Yan Liuyuan addressed Wang Fugui had changed. Wang Fugui also realized this change and was secretly delighted. He had taken a great liking to these 2 brothers. Compared to that silly son of his, they were so much better. Witnessing how Ren Xiaosu protected Yan Liuyuan in their struggle to stay alive over the years, he felt that the 2 of them really did not have it easy. Wang Fugui watched Li Xiaoyu and Yan Liuyuan as they ate the sweet potatoes. Suddenly, he looked around the school and said with a sigh, with Mr. Zhang gone, our town won't have a teacher anymore. Yan Liuyuan said unbothered, what's so bad about that? When my brother gets back, he'll take over as the teacher. Zhang Jinglan had already been sent away by Luolan for being the hot potato that he was. The day he was sent away was probably the most sensational day the town's refugees had ever seen. Quite a few military transport trucks and off-road vehicles stopped outside the school's entrance and that big shot from the stronghold whose name was Luolan bowed politely to Zhang Jinglan. The refugees couldn't have expected that their town's Mr. Zhang would be someone so important. If they had known, they wouldn't have scrimped on tuition and also sent their children to attend classes at the school. Who knew if they might have built some kind of connection? Thinking of this, many of the refugees decided they would send their children to school. The logic they had was this simple: they wanted to send their children to school not for knowledge, but for building connections. But before they could fantasize any further, Luolan sent Zhang Jinglan away that same day. Yan Liuyuan and Xiaoyu, who were living at the school, were utterly ignored by everyone. Even after Zhang Jinglan left, Wang Kongyang did not come to give them any further trouble. But even so, a lot of unfamiliar refugees started appearing at the school's entrance, peddling fruits or vegetables. Wang Fugui had seen some of them before and knew they usually worked at the factory. However, they were all pretending not to know one another here. It was at this time that Wang Fugui realized the stronghold's control over the town wasn't as simple as he thought it was. Some of the refugees had been bought as eyes for those in the stronghold. In normal times, these people were just ordinary refugees. But once some among the refugees wanted to start a rebellion or organize a strike, they would immediately inform those in the stronghold and turn over the names of those troublemakers. It was no wonder the 2 previous strikes had been suppressed so quickly by the private army from the stronghold. It was because they had eyes here. Wang Fugui remembered the faces of these people and took note not to offend them, nor ever tell them what he was really thinking. It was not only those refugees watching at the entrance. There were also a few people who clearly looked tougher and more ruthless than the private troops of the stronghold. Wang Fugui speculated they might very well be people from the Qing consortium. Speaking of Ren Xiaosu, Wang Fugui frowned. There's someone up ahead who works in a factory near the Jing Mountains who just got back. He said that there seems to be something going on over there and that a volcano in the mountains erupted. The entire sky above the Jing Mountains is filled with dark clouds now. However, Yan Liuyuan said in a very relaxed tone, my brother will be fine for sure. That was because the wish he made was to use his own life to ensure that Ren Xiaosu would return safely. Since he wasn't dead yet, it meant Ren Xiaosu was fine. If he told Wang Fugui and Xiaoyu about this, they would probably not believe him. But neither would Yan Liuyuan spill his own secrets. Wang Fugui thought for a moment before saying, true, a kid like Ren Xiaosu would definitely live on to be a scourge for a millennium. But right at this time, Wang Fugui felt the hairs on his back of his neck stand on end. Wang Fugui calmed himself and stifled his doubts, then whispered Yan Liuyuan and Xiaoyu, you two better be careful. If you wish to leave town, let me know. I'll help you to think of a way. I don't think that these people out here are here for you too. They should be targeting Ren Xiaosu instead. Wang Fugui was very smart. He thought about it over and over again before deducing that those people outside the school entrance were just like a net waiting for someone to get caught in it. Zhang Jinglin had been sent away, so who else could this net be for if not Ren Xiaosu? They want to arrest Ren Xiaosu? Why? Xiaohu nearly exclaimed. Wang Fugui considered it for a long time before saying, could Ren Xiaosu have caused trouble for those in the stronghold in the Jing Mountains? That's quite a possibility. However, the truth still exceeded Wang Fugui's imagination. Not only did Ren Xiaosu cause trouble for those people in the band, he even caused trouble for the Qing Consortium. At this moment, Qing Zhen was standing on one of the mountain slopes with a helpless expression. Just how fucking long do we have to continue walking until we get back to Stronghold 112? Su Man sighed and said, Boss, even you've started to curse and swear. Disconsolate, Qing Zhen said, my image has gone down the drain.